Edwin. Derek's voice trembled, his throat dry and sore. What happened? Edwin's face remained cold and distant, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent in his eyes. Derek felt a sudden tightness behind his eyes. He had been holding it together so well until now, but hearing those words made him feel deeply hurt without meaning to. He bit down hard on his lips, trying desperately to hold back the sob rising in his throat, but emotions surged over him like a wave. He could only clutch onto Edwin's hand tightly, as if holding onto the last lifeline. Derek replied, "Michael, that scoundrel tried to take advantage of me." Edwin turned his head to glance at James, about to signal him to help lift Derek up. When he heard footsteps coming from down the hallway, Michael rushed forward with a fierce expression, blood still fresh on his temple, his face dark and grim. Daniel followed closely behind him. When Michael saw Edwin standing in front of Derek, his pupils widened sharply and his pace slowed down. Daniel, confused, was about to speak up, but suddenly noticing Michael's serious look, quickly shut his mouth. "What's Mr. Edwin doing here too?" Michael struggled to keep himself from clenching his teeth, his voice coming out harsh and strained. Edwin didn't respond, simply speaking quietly to Derek. "I had James take you out." Daniel couldn't help but tug at Michael's sleeve, only to be met with a fierce glare. "Mr. Edwin and Derek are acquainted?" Michael asked cautiously. Edwin's gaze swept over, as if chilled with frost. Michael stood frozen, his legs trembling slightly on their own. Daniel waited a moment, seeing that Michael still wasn't speaking, before stepping forward. "Mr. Edwin, we have some private matters with Derek. We'd appreciate it if you'd give Mr. Michael a chance to talk to him alone." But instead, Edwin let out a faint scoff. "James, it seems you didn't carry out my instructions properly," he said coolly. James replied, "Apologies, Mr. Edwin, but the Bluebird production team did officially end their collaboration with him. Next time, no exceptions." Michael was momentarily stunned. By the time he tried to stop Daniel, it was already too late. "What do you mean ended collaboration?" Daniel's face turned pale in an instant, as realization struck him sharply. He shouted, "It was you. You're the one who cut me off. The person who's been supporting Derek is." Michael clamped a hand over Daniel's mouth and pulled him behind himself, his face flushing with anger and shock. He mentally scolded Daniel countless times, though Daniel had once mocked Derek for getting the Bluebird role through questionable means, and later got him exposed, leaving Michael nearly banned across all platforms. This was beyond anything he'd expected, but he never imagined that the person Derek had been working with was Edwin. If he had known all along that Derek was under Edwin's protection, Michael would never have followed Daniel's advice to stir up such trouble. He should have let Daniel go the moment things went wrong and never trusted his misleading words. Otherwise, how could it have ended like this? "Mr. Edwin, I didn't know about this before." "Now you do," Edwin said coldly. "If there are any personal matters to discuss, come by the Mu Group headquarters tomorrow. I also want to talk about the funding for the Jinsheng land project, but Jinsheng isn't under my control at all. It was a hard-won opportunity. We've worked too long and too hard on this, and if my father finds out..." Michael panicked completely, his face pale with streaks of red, lips trembling as he couldn't say a word. He glared at Daniel in frustration, unsure whether to blame him for pushing things or himself for failing to stop Derek in time. "And him? I never want to see him again, anywhere." Daniel slowly realized he had gotten himself into serious trouble. He wanted to argue back, but Michael held him tightly, leaving no chance for a word. Edwin didn't pay any further attention to their reactions. He didn't even glance their way. He gently placed Derek's hand on his thigh, lowered his gaze, and carefully straightened the sleeves that had gotten messy. His movements precise and gentle, as if treating a delicate piece of art. Derek's awareness began to fade. The earlier conversation buzzed in his ears like distant bees, chaotic but impossible to make sense of. At that moment, all he could feel were Edwin's slender fingers and the faintly rough texture of calluses on the pads brushing gently across his wrist. "Let's go home," he said softly. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the slightly open curtains, filling the room with a gentle warmth. A faint sound of a wheelchair rolling came from the doorway. Dully turning his head, Derek saw Edwin seated in the wheelchair, holding a steaming cup of coffee, silently watching him. "Awake!" Edwin's voice was low and carried a faint husky sleepiness typical of someone just waking. The wheelchair glided gently closer to the bed as he brought the cup to his lips for a light sip, then added, "Your assistant called 10 minutes ago. I took the day off for you." Derek paused, instinctively reaching for his phone. The hazy images in his mind suddenly came back. The red carpet, the dinner event, the restroom, and Edwin's hand offering help amidst the chaos. Last night. Derek stopped, a flicker of unease in his eyes. It's taken care of," Edwin said. "You won't be seeing them again." Derek nodded blankly, lowering his gaze as he rubbed his fingers together. "Thank you. Good thing he chose the right escape route last night. If not for running into Edwin, who knows what kind of trouble he might have gotten into." The event had no media present, but rumors can still spread quickly. And if he'd ended up in a secluded spot and happened to be found by Michael and the others, who knows what could have happened? His emotions were clearly visible on his face. Seeing that, Edwin figured he was fine and started to roll away in his wheelchair. "There's breakfast on the table. James bought it." Just as he spoke, Derek called out from behind, "Edwin, was it you who asked James to spread the information about Daniel?" Edwin slightly turned his head, a complex expression crossing his face as if silently asking, "You only just realized that?" Derek rubbed his hair, recalling the night when Edwin visited him and how he'd said, "Austin's team is more reliable," feeling guilty as he lowered his voice. "I thought it was just karma finally catching up with him after all he'd done. Thanks to you for this." Derek looked up at Edwin, hesitating before asking in a daze, "But why did you help me?" Edwin remained silent for a moment, his deep gaze as mysterious as fog. "Because seeing someone sobbing helplessly on the bed was pitiful," Edwin said coolly, then let out a quiet laugh. "So I took care of it, no trouble at all." Derek thought, so this is what they call when the cold king breaks? But it did feel pretty good. The air grew still. Edwin's wheelchair had already rolled out of the bedroom. Derek sat on the bed for a while, before groggily getting up and heading to the bathroom for a shower. And only then did he suddenly realize his clothes had been changed. Definitely not Edwin, he mused, squinting casually. That would be too much to ask of someone in a wheelchair. A mental image formed. James carrying him down the hallway, so it must have been James again. Hot water poured down from above, and with the warm steam rising, memories from last night slowly came back into focus. He remembered how he'd cried against Edwin's knee, how Edwin had held his hand to smooth out his crumpled sleeves and fasten the cufflinks for him. And when James tried to pull him up from the floor, he'd clung tightly to Edwin's hand, unwilling to let go. Oh no! Derek covered his face, his ears burning with embarrassment. The hotter the water felt, the more he wished he could vanish into a drawer and hop on a time machine to rewind last night, so he wouldn't have touched Michael's drink, and instead sneak off to beat up Daniel in secret, just to get rid of this deep shame. But now that he thought about it, Edwin didn't seem entirely cold-hearted like the story had made him out to be. In the original tale, if Edwin had seen Derek in such a state last night, he'd probably have just waved him off and left him to deal with it alone. Maybe even complained about his tears getting on his clothes. After rinsing the shampoo from his hair, Derek figured part of this change might be thanks to how he'd been acting since their marriage. Quietly collecting his paycheck, keeping out of trouble, and never causing any fuss. He felt confident that avoiding a terrible outcome was finally within reach. Edwin only let Jack get him a half-day leave, but Derek still had to return to the set in the afternoon. But he never expected that due to the buzz from last night's red carpet event, the filming location was completely surrounded on all sides. Why did so many people suddenly show up? Derek was startled, and when he turned to look at Jack, he realized Jack's reaction was just as surprised as his own. Perfect. Two unworldly, unlucky souls stuck together now. Derek scanned the crowded crowd, mostly filled with young girls and a few men carrying DSLR cameras who seemed to be paparazzi. He had planned to walk straight through to the makeup room without looking around, but then a loud voice erupted from the crowd. "Derek's here. Should have arrived ages ago. Just look at him. The young master is still the young master, even able to skip work on Oliver's set. Don't spread rumors. The crew just said he was unwell and took a leave of absence. Derek, look this way. All natural. Looks even better than in his live streams. What kind of fan confrontation is this?" Derek turned and fled even faster. But amid the noise, someone raised a hastily made rally flag, featuring a photo of him from last night's red carpet event. Derek! Derek couldn't believe that a girl who was shorter by an entire head could produce such a powerful voice. I really want your Hangshui style signature. Could you please give me one just like the one on last night's signing board? Derek froze in place. Derek felt utterly defeated. After a moment of silence, Derek finally walked toward her. The girl beside her snapped pictures rapidly as he approached. Derek took the pen she handed him and muttered under his breath. Never seen such an unusual request before. Then, raising his voice slightly with a gentle tone, he asked, "Where should I sign?" The girl pulled out a signing board from her bag and handed it to Derek with a bright smile. Derek was genuinely impressed. "You fans are really efficient. If I could get my work done that quickly, I wouldn't be constantly stressed by deadlines." He carefully signed his name on the signature board with a gold foil pen, then paused and added one more line. "For personal use only, that's top-notch awareness." The young girl couldn't help but laugh. "Derek, focus on your acting. Once you've built your career, anything is possible," she said earnestly. "The fan club has already started rebuilding. We came in a rush this time, but I hope you'll keep shining like you did at last night's red carpet." Derek blinked in surprise, then replied softly, "Thank you, I will." With one person leading the way, others nearby started chattering excitedly about wanting his signature too. It was Derry's first time dealing with something like this. He felt truly honored and almost wished he had 6 or 7 extra hands to keep up, signing frantically. Finally, Jack arrived to relay a message from Oliver, which gave him the chance to shove the nearly finished banners and signature board into their hands. "One more? I want one too. Next time, next time. I've already used up my morning leave. If I'm late again this afternoon, I'll have to pay extra." Derek waved his hands repeatedly and then dashed off in a flash, leaving everyone looking at each other, unsure what to say. "If I'm not mistaken, they should be paid based on their scene time, right? Oh no, my brain wasn't exactly sharp when I climbed that wall earlier. After all this trouble to get up here, I hope I didn't end up becoming a fan of someone who isn't very bright. It's okay, sister. Even if the paper fish is not too smart, it's still wonderfully charming." The sudden appearance of these spontaneous fans at the *Skybird* filming set was so overwhelming that they quickly made it onto Weibo's trending topics. Among the posts were various high-quality, unfiltered photos of Derek without any makeup. Uninformed netizens thought Derek was causing another scene again. But once they clicked in, they were genuinely surprised by his natural, no-filter photo. At that moment, Derek had just finished filming with Levi and was sprawled on his chair like a lifeless fish, half asleep as he reached for his phone. Then he opened the search bar and hesitantly typed in a few words. Levi was biting into what looked like an ice cream he'd scrounged from somewhere, leaning forward to ask, "Should we go over the next scene?" He glanced at the screen on Derek's phone and said, surprised, "What are you looking at? Getting someone a gift?" Derek weakly lifted his eyelids to glance at him, then gave a tired nod. He thought about how Edwin had helped him deal with the Daniel situation and also kept Michael from making things awkward at last night's dinner party. There was no way he could let it go without showing his gratitude. Otherwise, his conscience would feel too heavy to bear. Levi sat down on the armrest beside him and put an arm around his shoulder. "I'm pretty good at picking gifts, whether for a man or a woman." Derek was already stumped, completely unsure what to choose. A helpful advisor like this, he wasn't about to turn it down. But just as he was about to speak, a sudden chill ran down his back, making him shiver involuntarily. Then he heard a sharp, sarcastic voice say, "You're the one who's really good at receiving gifts, aren't you?" Derek jumped at the unexpected sound and nearly dropped his phone. He turned around to see a man standing not far behind them. His face seemed like finely crafted art. His high nose perfectly balanced the proportions of his features. Deep-set brows cast shadows, whether from the light or from mood, making Derek feel uneasy inside. His hair was slightly long and loosely tied into a low ponytail. He wore a crisp, well-fitted coat like something straight off a runway. But what truly caught everyone's attention wasn't the man himself. It was the green and yellow macaw perched on his shoulder, a parakeet about the size of a palm, its feathers vivid and vibrant with yellow and green tones, perched proudly on his shoulder. Its round eyes scanned the surroundings alertly, while its sharp beak occasionally chirped out clear, bright sounds. The man's gaze flicked over Derek's shocked expression before stepping forward calmly. Suddenly, the parakeet let out a loud squawk. "Warning! Warning!" Rival detected warning. Levi beside him couldn't help but snort with laughter. He waved his hand toward the bird and teased. "What on earth have you been teaching it lately? Cho-cho, come here." The bird fluttered its wings and landed neatly on Levi's fingertip. "I'm truly innocent, my dear clear soup lord," the man said with a lazy grin. "How could I know where it picked that up? Maybe someone's been gone for days, and it thinks its real father is about to be abandoned. Now it's speaking out on my behalf." The man moved forward at a steady pace, carrying an intense presence that wasn't overwhelming. He stopped between Derek and Levi, subtly separating them. With practiced ease, he placed his hand lightly on the latter's shoulder, lips curving into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Sorry to trouble you. It just talks a lot." Then he leaned down and took a big bite right out of Levi's ice cream. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Mason, his family member." The parakeet seemed to understand perfectly. It bounced up quickly and cried out again, "Daddy!" Its fluffy head rubbed gently against Levi's hand. "Levi, you're abandoning your partner and child. You don't keep promises." Levi stared at the bear cone left in his hand, shot a sharp look at Mason, then shoved the ice cream into his arms. "I didn't forget to buy one. Why are you even here instead of your own set?" Derek noticed how Mason's fingers lightly pressed against Levi's neck. A gesture that felt like comfort, but more like playful flirtation. He wished he could vanish into his seat right then. "Can't I come over to check on you? That close?" Mason said with mock hurt, gently tugging a tuft of hair above Cho-cho's head. "Oliver mentioned your crew hit a rough patch. Asked if I could recommend some reliable actors. Since I'm free right now and haven't worked with you in ages, figured why not come pitch myself." Levi glanced at Derek and asked, "You mean Owen?" Mason let out a sigh, looking a bit sheepish. "I really wanted to surprise you, but now I see it was just me being overly hopeful. What should I do?" "Cho-cho, your mom seems like she doesn't want to see us at all." The parrot tilted its round head, looking at Levi with an innocent and helpless expression. Derek, "Great, just great. The whole family's a bunch of drama queens." He quietly shifted sideways, planning to sneak away and give the two of them space to talk. But Mason instantly spotted his move and turned with a bright smile. "Levi often tells me how talented you are. Since I'm feeling bored lately and want to act again, let's work together. Good luck." There was something about that tone. It felt like he might attack at any moment. Derek silently pulled his leg back, forced a smile, and replied with a weak, "Nice to work with you. Relax," Mason said with a gentle smile, but the look in his eyes was sharp as a hook. "I have plenty of experience guiding actors." Levi finally caught hold of his hand resting on his shoulder, gave him a warning glance, then explained to Derek. "Mason used to be an actor. Now he's switched careers and works as a director." Then the tone shifted. "But Owen's scenes aren't many. Just play your part, then head back soon. Wasn't it just because you didn't wear the outfit I picked for last night's red carpet?" Mason, "Do I really act that childish?" Levi stood up and cut him off. "Since you're here, come help me run through the lines. Don't keep them waiting." Mason's eyes lit up instantly, breaking into a wide grin. Derek let out a sigh of relief. "Still, Derek." Levi suddenly leaned in and tapped his phone screen. "If you're giving gifts to someone of the same gender, it's probably best not to choose a watch." Could cause misunderstandings," Levi said with a smile, then gently guided the man and his bird away. Derek glanced sideways and saw Mason casually wrap an arm around his neck, leaning in to say, "You know all this about me. Levi, what did that tie mean when I gave it to you? And the belt and keychain. Wasn't there also perfume before?" Derek quietly noted down a few possible choices and some mistakes to avoid. After picking out the gift for Edwin, paying the bill, and seeing the account balance drop sharply, Derek felt a pang of regret. After all, giving Edwin anything small wouldn't do. It would seem careless and make him think poorly of me. Luckily, thanks to income from live streams and the film The Bluebird, Derek had saved up enough not to be in dire straits. But as someone who once earned less than Edwin's monthly salary, suddenly spending such a large sum was hard to get over emotionally. "It's fine. Saving someone's life deserves the greatest return possible. Derek repeated this thought several times in his mind before finally calming down. He quickly looked up Mason online and discovered that before Levi won the award, Mason had already earned 2 Film Festival Best Actor awards. Later, he switched to directing after failing to find scripts he truly liked. According to Jack, he stepped in without asking for a single cent in payment. Just as he said himself, bored and simply wanted to satisfy his craving for acting. That's what it means to be wealthy, Derek muttered, and Jack nearby nodded wholeheartedly. Since Mason's schedule was hard to arrange, the next scene was changed directly into a reshoot of Owen's part. Compared to Daniel's acting, raw emotion without much technique, Mason stood far above in skill, almost effortlessly masterful. Yet to everyone's surprise, even under such intense pressure, Derek didn't feel at all overwhelmed. The moment he stepped into the frame, his presence shifted in a subtle but noticeable way. In everyday life, Derek was reserved and carried a hint of youthfulness, like a newly sprouted bamboo, upright yet still growing. But now, he seemed to have transformed completely. His presence suddenly became intense, his eyes sharp and calm. He appeared completely at ease. Whether dodging Owen's sword or leaping across rooftops, his grip on the blade remained steady as stone. Every move was clean and precise, light in motion yet concealing hidden danger. At the moment their blades met, felt like sparks flew through the air, and tension hung heavy in the silence. Derek moved with agility and speed, without hesitation or flashy showiness. Every action and expression seemed so natural that you could only believe he was born for Benjamin's role. The camera captured every breath they took and each subtle shift in their expressions. Oliver sat up straight, staring intently at the monitor. He could feel this take far surpassed the previous version by a wide margin. Really does get stronger when pushed, Oliver said with admiration. If it weren't for Mason's scheduling conflicts, I'd have loved to borrow his talent without paying. I remember Mason was working on a new film? She casually asked Levi beside her. He wouldn't be using this as an excuse to scout for talent across different sets, would he? Levi chuckled. That mind of his? Not capable of such clever plans. Still, the subtle glint in his eyes betrayed something more thoughtful. Levi adjusted his sleeve with a casual motion and said lightly, "But since you mentioned it, I'll suggest we bring him into conversation." Oliver didn't respond. His gaze stayed fixed on the monitor. Derek's performance wasn't a calculated precision. It felt instinctive, and that very spontaneity made it clear he was no beginner without formal training. Even with Mason, a seasoned veteran, standing right there, Derek showed no sign of nerves. Instead, he carried himself freely and brought the character's soul to life in full force. Cut! That one's a go. Derek lowered his sword and stood still, taking the water from Jack. His strength drained instantly. Muscles that had been tightly wound began to twitch, and his hands trembled as he held the cup. Jack saw him spill most of the water within seconds and quietly called out, "Derek." But Derek's eyes were blank. No sign of awareness or response. The crew members around him were busy setting up equipment for the next scene, chatting and laughing in small groups, but he seemed completely unaware of their voices. Derek. Mason's macaw had flown over unnoticed, landing on the back of Derek's hand holding the water cup, its soft head gently brushing against his wrist, nearly making Derek's legs give way. It wasn't until Austin, playing Lucas, appeared in the studio with perfectly styled makeup and hair, still holding his script and calmly discussing something with Oliver, that Derek's focus finally snapped back. Derek's eyes finally sharpened into focus, staring intently at Austin's face without moving a muscle. As if sensing his gaze, Austin turned with a puzzled expression. But before he could react, he saw Derek cradling the macaw and quickly walking toward him. Austin froze for a moment, then went completely still, like his body had shut down mid-motion. "How was your trip across the sea? Did you find that night pearl you've been longing for?" Derek gently rubbed Austin's cheek, then held Chocho out in front of him. "Henry brought back some rare items from the northern lands. Since I don't need them, why not take them?" His voice wasn't loud, but he didn't try to keep it down either. Almost everyone on set clearly heard that unusually tender tone, and the strange scene left them all shocked. Whoa! I've lived long enough to see Derek actually acting this affectionate with Austin. Only Mason, struggling against Levi's grip, shouted angrily. "That's my bird. Give back my son, Derek." Austin stared blankly for a few seconds, clearly not expecting Derek to suddenly launch into such an intimate approach. Derek's hands, unused to hard labor, were unnaturally smooth, like fine jelly jade. The gentle touch across his cheek made Austin shiver involuntarily. The warmth from that hand spread across his entire face in an instant, almost as if it was traveling down his neck. The tingling sensation at the fingertips felt like a gentle electric current, making every nerve tense up suddenly. Austin hesitated and glanced down at the cockatiel in Derek's hand, confused about what was happening. The bird swayed slightly and struggled weakly, its once smooth and shiny feathers now fluffed up around Derek's fingertips. He couldn't tell if he'd walked into the wrong set, or if Derek had suddenly changed his usual behavior. Was this some strange new act? "You?" Austin finally managed to speak, his expression full of mixed emotions. "Are you okay?" Derek's expression remained serious, as if he hadn't noticed anything unusual about what he was doing. Austin noticed that both Derek and the bird tilted their heads at the same time, their looks of confusion almost identical. Felt like something had just pricked his heart. Derek took another step forward, gently nudging Chocho a little deeper into Austin's arms. He moved his hand from the face and softly rubbed Austin's jawline, speaking as naturally as if they were truly brotherly. "Don't like it? I'll have Henry get something even more fun next time." The crew members quietly paused their work, some glancing openly while others subtly watched them. Austin felt his neck grow hot under all the attention. The cockatiel's soft body kept rubbing against him, and it chirped a few times now and then. He stood frozen like a statue, neither daring to hold it nor let go. Seeing Austin's silence, Derek's expression shifted from confusion to mild concern. An awkward quiet fell over the scene. Only the round bird broke it by flapping its wings at an odd moment and chirping clearly into Austin's ear. "Ears are red, ears are red." Austin's face completely fell apart in reaction. He stiffly caught Chocho, handling it like some mysterious and potentially dangerous creature, holding it lightly and keeping a bit of distance just in case. Levi leaned on Mason's shoulder and couldn't help but laugh. Hearing that, Austin felt his face burn even hotter, layered with the embarrassment from earlier. Is Derek still stuck in the script or something? Maybe he's faking it on purpose, trying to make friends with Austin? However, Derek seemed not to hear the noisy chatter around him. He gently patted Austin's shoulder, his face still wearing that same calm and kind expression. Even though he instinctively noticed his own behavior was a bit off, his body wouldn't stop the strange urge rising within him. Austin's fingertip lightly brushed against the parrot's soft feathers. A second later, he lifted his head, trying hard not to notice the curious glances from others, and locked eyes with Derek. "I can't keep it," he forced out with great effort. "Besides, it belongs to Mason." Derek's lips moved as if he wanted to say more, but not far away. Mason could no longer hold back under Levi's restraint and quickly stepped forward, snatching the parrot into his arms. "Wake up!" He snapped his fingers right by Derek's ear. "Still using something Levi gave you to play nice? Next thing we know, are you going to pack me up as a gift?" Derek was startled so badly, he froze like an old wind-up toy. His fingers stuck midair. He stood motionless for a few seconds, then slowly regained some awareness, his eyes darting around before finally turning toward the other person. The parrot, now back in Mason's arms, squirmed nervously, tucking its head into his palm. Derek stared at the feathers fanned out behind it, momentarily lost in thought. The crew members all lowered their heads, stifling giggles, while Austin beside him felt so embarrassed he might have vanished into the ground. Derek's mouth twitched slightly, finally snapping out of his daze. He only just realized what he'd done, and instantly felt his face burn. Shame flooded through him, so intense he wished he could slip into a crack in the floor, even deeper than Austin had. He used to snap out of character quickly, never thinking he'd develop this habit, probably because Mason's presence was so intense that it pulled him in completely, making it hard to pull back. Derek shifted his sore legs. High-intensity fight scenes really took a toll on his energy. He cleared his throat, forcing a slightly awkward smile before stepping back quickly to put some distance between himself and the two, trying to hide his flustered mood with a light tone. Just kidding around." After saying that, he instinctively reached up as if to cover his face. Great, the excuse totally failed. Shame surged over him like a flood breaking through its banks, crashing down all around. Derek felt he'd completely lost himself in the moment. He wished more than anything he had the power to vanish or teleport away, just to disappear from this mortifying scene. Sorry about that, Austin. He glanced at Austin's rigid posture with a guilty look. I was just kinda zoning out. Did I upset you? Austin's neck had turned red, his eyes darting aimlessly across the ground. His hands were clenched tightly as he tried to stay calm, but that odd feeling in his chest kept bubbling up. On one hand was an overwhelming sense of awkwardness. On the other, something harder to describe. He wasn't sure if he was overreacting or if it was because he'd never felt such a strange closeness from Derek before. This unfamiliar contact had stirred up reactions that felt like both surprise and nervous tension. It's fine. Austin finally spoke, his tone more natural than Derek's forced cheer. This parrot is really interesting. Lucas would probably love it. Then he gave a stiff smile. You just seemed different today, so I didn't react right away. Got caught off guard. Of all the times to bring up Lucas again. It's been barely a moment since he'd managed to forget. Derek forced a weak smile. Luckily, Mason stepped in to save the moment. Holding the parrot, Mason walked back over to Levi and casually draped an arm around his neck. If you're gonna blame someone, it's gotta be his opponent. No way he could stay in character without getting fully immersed. Can't say I'm surprised. I'm that good. Levi gave him a light slap on the cheek. Cut the bragging already. Derek felt touched, his eyes welling up as the entire crew's attention was drawn to the two of them. Are you really okay? Austin looked down, his gaze landing on Derek's face. He'd been steadily undoing the image he had of Derek lately. He used to think of the pampered young master as bold and fearless, someone who didn't care about anyone except William, whom he'd once pursued intensely. No one else could move him, but now, seeing Derek's clearly flustered expression, a strange thought struck him. It was odd to realize that even such a small moment could throw the boy off balance. How sweet, the thought popped into Austin's mind, and he froze for a moment, startled by it himself. Derek paused, then looked up at him. His thoughts were completely different from what Austin was feeling. He gave a small smile, his tension easing slightly, thinking, Austin really knows how to read the room. He stayed calm even after I dragged us both into an awkward moment. It's fine, really. Derek waved it off, deciding to make a quick escape. I'll take a breather first, get myself together. See you on set. Austin watched his back as he hurried away, a thoughtful look in his eyes. But half an hour later, it seemed Deeker hadn't fully recovered from the earlier awkward moment, and his performance in this scene was off. He finally managed to deliver a long monologue, but stumbled over the last line, completely ruining it. Derek hadn't even registered what happened when he heard Oliver's firm cut. This was the first time since joining the cast that Derek had received a take due to his own mistake. Though he didn't seem bothered, the crew members began exchanging glances and whispering quietly. Derek's filming had been going so smoothly that this simple hiccup caught them off guard. Derek took a sip of water, ran his fingers through his tangled thoughts, and let his gaze drift aimlessly. He couldn't help but feel awkward every time he looked at Austin's face, his mind replaying the moment when he'd accidentally touched him in an odd way. It was incredibly awkward. Next to him, Austin turned the pages of his script with precision, his expression restrained and composed, only a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth betraying the inner tension he was holding back. Oliver frowned and called out, 5-minute break. Take a moment to reset your focus. The set suddenly buzzed with activity. Oliver held his pen between his fingers and tapped the armrest of the chair when the assistant director leaned in quietly. They've had a rough history, even if their previous scenes went smoothly. This is their first time playing close brothers off-screen. Might be tough to adjust right away. Oliver hesitated and said, I don't think they'd let personal feelings interfere like that on set. They're professionals. The assistant director glanced briefly at Derek. But playing brotherly affection with a former rival isn't easy. Their energy is off. Their acting feels stiff, and Derek's clearly distracted. Oliver paused thoughtfully, then stood up and walked toward the two of them. Derek's gift finally arrived in Edwin's hands on the third day after ordering. The carved antique clock pendulum ticked steadily, and sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains, casting soft shadows on the mahogany table. When James knocked and entered, Edwin was reading documents at the desk. He glanced slightly upon hearing the door open, but didn't respond until he saw the elegant gift box in James's hands, then slowly set down his papers and looked up with quiet curiosity. "It's from Derek," James said, placing the gift box on the table, his tone calm and neutral. Edwin nodded slowly and began unwrapping the package with deliberate care, his expression giving no sign of any particular emotion. Inside the box was thoughtfully arranged. A set of vintage jade cufflinks and tie bar rested on deep purple velvet. The jade had rich, dark tones, each piece meticulously carved with fine detail, glowing with a cool green shimmer in the sunlight. He picked up the central cufflink, examined it closely for a moment, then let out a quiet, knowing chuckle. "This set must have cost quite a bit, wouldn't you say? The craftsmanship is impressive." "This must have cost a fortune," James said in agreement, though he silently added to himself. "But compared to what's in your drawer, there's hardly anything at all." Edwin gently handled the tie clip, his fingertip gliding across the jade surface and tracing the carved patterns with a thoughtful expression. He really went all out. Wonder what he looked like when paying for this? It was probably a mix of clenched frustration and reluctant acceptance. That thought only made Edwin's smile widen slightly. James smoothly asked, "Do you need to reply to Derek about anything?" Edwin replied instead, "How's Derek doing on set?" "Derek isn't at the studio today." James hesitated slightly before speaking slowly. "He and Austin went to Shanshan Equestrian Ranch." Edwin paused, then suddenly looked up. Shanshan Equestrian Ranch lies nestled among distant hills, a few kilometers outside the film base, far from city noise and crowds. The view is lush with greenery, while gentle wind whispers through trees and birdsong rings clearly in the air. Around them stretch endless rolling meadows, wild grass bent low by morning dew, merging at the edges with small shrubs and scattered pine trees. Not far away, several chestnut and white horses graze leisurely, occasionally flicking their tails to shoo off flies. A winding path runs along the slope, ending at a viewing platform, facing a slender, delicate waterfall, though Derek used to complain often to friends about being nothing more than an overworked laborer, like the hardest working ox on the farm. Now, seeing it firsthand, some of these horses seem even more relaxed at work than he is, especially after the chestnut horse chosen by the staff gave him a flick of its tail. It only confirmed his thoughts all the more. A fake ox can boss people around on the job. A real one still has to bow and scrape at midnight for its bosses. Derek sighed deeply. Austin asked, tilting his head in mild confusion. "What's wrong?" Derek shook his head, seeing that Austin had already mounted the white horse, and quickly stepped onto the stirrup under the staff's guidance before swinging himself up with a push. The fitted equestrian suit accentuated his legs, making them look long and straight, while the tailored vest cinched his waist into a narrow line, almost as if one hand could wrap around it completely. His usual casual ease was entirely gone, replaced by an air of restraint and distance. Austin's gaze drifted over casually, paused for a brief moment, then returned to the horizon as if nothing had happened. After that scene was shot, Oliver spoke with the two of them and said they were like strangers who knew each other too well. So their on-screen chemistry always seemed just slightly off. The familiarity came from how Lucas and Benjamin naturally interacted as brothers, both following the script's cues precisely. The unfamiliarity lay in Derek and him. There was a noticeable disconnect between them, failing to spark the chemistry Oliver had hoped for. So kind-hearted Luna gave them a full day off just to reconnect and find their rhythm. She even suggested several options, like going to an amusement park or spending the day in an arcade, since there was a horse riding scene coming up soon, and Derek had never ridden before. They eventually decided on heading to the riding stable. Derek gripped the reins tightly, compared to his tense, battle-ready stance. The chestnut horse beneath him seemed utterly relaxed, unbothered by the novice rider's movements as it calmly trotted toward the center of the field. Derek felt like his head was spinning. Austin effortlessly nudged the horse with his legs, guiding the white steed smoothly toward Derek. He whispered softly, "Relax a bit. Don't stress so much. You'll wear yourself out if you stay this tense." Derek tried to adjust his posture, hoping to look more natural, but the proud horse wasn't cooperative. If he eased up even slightly, the chestnut mare immediately tossed her head, as if mocking his awkwardness. "Are you trying to mess with me on purpose?" Derek muttered under his breath, Annoyed, Austin couldn't help but laugh at the sight of his flustered expression. His eyes crinkled slightly, hinting at a playful mischief that felt very much like youth. "You're laughing." Derek tugged on the reins and snapped back to glare at him, his frustration spilling out. "We're supposed to be building our bond today. Logically, you should treat me like your most respected elder brother all day. You didn't even say brother a few times to cheer me up, and now you're just watching me struggle." With that, Derek raised his hand as if wiping away a tear. That only made Austin laugh harder. He leaned forward slightly, blew a quick whistle toward Derek's horse, then gently patted the chestnut mare's neck. "All right, behave now." To everyone's surprise, the horse seemed to actually understand him, giving a small kick of its hoof before calming down slightly from its playful behavior. Derek let out a breath, glancing at Austin's gentle smile with curiosity. "You actually have this skill?" Austin nodded calmly. "I had a role in a past drama where I played the main character's second-in-command. Before filming, I trained in horseback riding for 3 months. My instructor was from Inner Mongolia and grew up riding horses, so I picked up a bit from him." After hearing that, Derek murmured softly, "No wonder you became popular so fast. Just this level of dedication. Anyone would feel humbled." Austin didn't catch what he was muttering and was about to ask when he saw Derek already pulling the reins ahead. The mountain breeze was refreshing, and they slowly rode up the path toward the scenic overlook. The scenery grew more expansive along the way, with warm sunlight filtering through pine needles and sprinkling the ground, while the air carried a comforting scent of grass and soil. Halfway up, Derek's movements became smoother and his nerves eased. He started reciting Benjamin's lines casually, without the intense emotion or clear pronunciation from filming, not even bothering with logic between scenes, sometimes changing a few words on his own. Austin caught the mood and responded in kind, relaxing into the moment. "If I could, I'd protect you my whole life. Just stay a little boy forever within the Xie family. But the world's harsh. One day you'll find out." Derek paused and let out a soft, resigned laugh. "Anyway, what's the point of telling you now? I'm here shielding you while you go off recklessly all the time. The discipline elder has reported you no less than once this month." "Teacher," Austin said with a hint of amusement. "Lucas from my side says there's no line in the script about scolding him for wandering off." Derek shot him a glance. "But how come Benjamin back home said kids like Lucas really need to be taught a lesson?" The two of them casually riffed on an imaginary script, when suddenly, the sound of rapid hoofbeats came from behind. Derek turned dazedly to look back and saw a young man in black equestrian attire riding a pure black horse galloping toward them at full speed. His messy short hair flew wildly in the wind, his sunglasses covering half his face. But from that confident lower half, one could guess who he was. Derek quickly turned his horse to avoid it, but didn't expect the black horse to be faster than imagined. Before he even reacted, it had surged past them. Then William pulled hard on the reins, making the horse stop gracefully with a cloud of dust rising from its hooves. William took off his sunglasses and stared at both of them with an odd expression, his face twitching slightly. "No way. Now I know why my family's AI assistant warned me not to go out today." Derek followed his line of sight to Austin, thinking to himself, "You dummy, why can't you even speak properly? That useless mouth should be donated. Save everyone from another 100 chapters of chasing after the wrong person." "William," Austin raised an eyebrow and subtly positioned his horse between Derek and himself. "What are you doing here?" "What else? I was bored, just hanging out with friends." William flicked his sunglasses, wiped them briefly on his jacket, then slipped them into his pocket. "They're over there playing golf. I don't know how to do it, so it got dull." "Speaking of you two," William let out a mocking chuckle as he turned toward Austin. "When did the two of you become such good friends?" Derek started wondering if he should slip away quietly and give the main couple some space to connect. Austin didn't seem fazed by William's teasing, his voice still calm. "We've been working together lately. We're just getting a feel for things." William shot a playful glance at Derek, who was mostly hidden behind him, then suddenly laughed when he saw the way Derek was hunched over, probably plotting something mischievous. "You two move like old ladies crossing the street. Why even get on horses? How about racing instead?" "No thanks," Austin said. "Derek's riding a horse for the first time. It wouldn't be safe." William gave a slight nod, quietly repeating Derek's name in his mind before looking at him again. his eyes flashing with unmistakable challenge. First time riding? But going around a small loop shouldn't be that hard. Derek's expression instantly turned vivid. He'd barely managed to keep the troublemaker steady for 2 steps, thanks only to Austin's guidance and patience, and now being asked to race. It was like asking him to give up his life. William, you've got such a sharp tongue. I hope you never get a single date for the next 200 chapters. Derek silently cursed in his mind. But then he suddenly had an idea. He popped his head out from behind Austin and smiled brightly. Sure, let's not race on horseback. How about we see who can reach the viewing platform fastest? William's expression darkened for a moment, then his eyebrows lifted, clearly surprised by how quickly Derek agreed. Fine, he said with a crooked grin, but since we're racing, there should be a bet. Derek replied casually, we'll figure that out when we get up there. Sure you can make it to the viewing platform? William gave a sharp grunt. Who do you think you're mocking? Then let's begin, countdown 5 and go, Derek said, turning his horse around and positioning it diagonally in front of Austin, blocking his path. Austin glanced at him with a puzzled look. Derek winked back, offering a sly grin, but William didn't notice the brief exchange. As soon as the countdown ended, he shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. Meanwhile, Austin's white horse couldn't move forward due to the chestnut stallion blocking its way, and was forced to back up slightly as well. Seeing William's figure vanish around the corner, Derek leaned forward with a pleased expression and said to Austin, let's go quickly. There's a traitor in the stable. I want to move our meeting spot, Derek said, pulling on the reins to turn. I've developed a deep dislike for William. I'm actually nervous whenever I see him. Let him race alone if he wants to. Like a clever fox, sunlight glinted through his hair, turning the ends golden. The curve of his side formed a graceful line as he turned slightly, and his eyes softened, glowing faintly with warmth. Austin's heartbeat skipped for a moment, then he let out a quiet laugh. All right, as soon as the words left his lips, he pulled on the reins and galloped back alongside Derek. But what if he shows up at the viewing platform and doesn't find us? Then I'll say my riding skills aren't good enough. I fell off, and you had to rush me to the hospital, then praise him a bit. Say he won this round, how impressive he is. And Edwin will be thrilled. He'd never suspect we're the ones who stood him up. He couldn't help but laugh out loud, teasing, can't believe a grown man acts like a kid. Derek widened his eyes in shock and stared toward the stable entrance, then fell silent at once. There sat Edwin in a wheelchair, surrounded by a golden retriever that wagged its tail wildly and stuck its tongue out playfully. The golden retriever playfully circled around Edwin's legs, its tail wagging like a miniature helicopter. It occasionally stood on its hind legs to nudge the armrest of his wheelchair, clearly hoping for a friendly pat on the head. Yet cold and indifferent, Edwin kept his fingers curled tightly against his thigh, showing no sign of responding. Austin clearly noticed the scene and instinctively glanced at Derek's expression. Edwin, what are you doing here? But at that moment, Derek had only one thought. Good thing I managed to get William away. Otherwise, this would have turned into a full-blown awkward situation with all 4 of us. Edwin's gaze swept briefly over the eager golden retriever before lifting his eyes and locking directly onto Derek. The bright golden sunlight bathed his face, softening the usually deep intensity of his eyes until they appeared nearly amber. His expression remained calm as ever, almost colder under the glow. But Derek suddenly felt an unshakable sense of being caught. It was like when he and his friends used to sneak snacks from a corner store, only to be caught mid-reach by their parent walking in after work. Yet despite all that, his heartbeat betrayed him with an unsteady skip. Derek subtly tugged on the reins. The spirited chestnut horse spun in place several times and shook its head, clearly puzzled by why he'd stopped so suddenly. Seeing this, Austin lightly patted the horse's back and turned to Derek. Shall we go say hello? Derek thought, they've already seen us. Can you really just turn around and leave? Besides, he's practically your boss. Even if you wanted to run off, I doubt he'd let you. Go ahead, Derek said lightly, then urged the horse forward with a gentle squeeze of his legs and galloped toward the rest area. Unlike his earlier slow senior citizen stroll, the short distance suddenly felt charged with drama. As he neared the stable exit, Derek pulled hard on the reins and executed a smooth, elegant stop just like William had done before, right in front of Edwin. He didn't realize how much that pose resembled a teenage boy trying too hard to impress a girl. he liked by showing off on the court. "Nice timing, Edwin," Derek said as he handed the reins to an attendant, then calmly stepped into the shaded pavilion. Once he noticed Austin following with a curious expression, but something moved faster than him. The golden retriever that had been circling around Edwin was full of energy. Derek hadn't even steadied himself in the pavilion when it charged into his arms like a whirlwind. If Austin hadn't quickly braced him from behind, Derek's head might have met the floor with quite a thud. From the look of it, this big fellow probably weighed over 60 pounds. Derek rubbed its fluffy head, thinking to himself, then, seeing that someone finally paid attention. The dog quickly licked his hand with glee, leaving a shiny trail of drool behind. "Edwin," Austin said as he stepped forward with a greeting. Edwin gave a slight nod, glancing at Derek, frantically pulling his hand away and searching for a napkin. He reached out to the nearby table, grabbed something, and tossed it straight into Derek's lap. "Thanks." Edwin paused mid-tap on the wheelchair armrest, lifting his brow just slightly. So subtly it was hard to tell what he felt. "I thought you'd be at the studio today. Didn't expect you had the free time for horseback riding," Edwin said, his tone calm and steady, though he paused deliberately mid-sentence to emphasize the word free time. Unaware of anything, Derek quickly wiped his hand dry, dropped into a chair, poured tea for himself, and even passed one cup to Austin. "Luna asked us to spend some time together to build better rapport. She gave us the day off on purpose, so..." The sudden warmth startled him so much that his hand trembled, spilling most of the tea. Then came Edwin's quiet question. "How's the bonding going?" "Not really. Your brother kind of ruined it." Derek turned to look at Austin, wanting to know what he thought. He didn't have any issues with Austin personally, but he was worried that Austin might feel uncomfortable around him because of what happened before. But Austin seemed completely unaware, his face innocent as he said, "It's going well. Derek's horseback riding has improved a lot." Edwin listened silently, his expression still calm. Yet there was something unreadable in his eyes now. He leaned forward slightly from the wheelchair, his gaze sharp and fixed on Derek's face. "Is that so?" The words came out quiet, almost like a whisper. Derek shot back, "Did I ride badly just now?" Then he muttered under his breath, "I think I'm really talented." Austin, close by, caught the mumbled remark and couldn't help but smile slightly, barely suppressing a laugh. Edwin heard it and glanced at him briefly, his lips twitching just slightly before he said nothing. Still, Derek didn't expect any praise from Edwin. He used his free hand to gently rub the golden retriever's head again as it continued its playful antics by his leg, then changed the subject. "Is this dog from the stable? Why wasn't I aware of him when we arrived?" Edwin looked down. The golden retriever, having gotten plenty of attention earlier, happily dashed back to his wheelchair and pressed itself against Edwin's leg, nuzzling affectionately. "No," Edwin said, glancing toward the person standing nearby. "It belongs to William." Derek couldn't help but remark, "Well, he and his owner are nothing alike." After all, among the three of them present, William disliked Derek the most, followed by Edwin. Yet this dog kept circling around both of them. Unexpectedly, Edwin gave a quiet Derek looked at him in mild surprise. The dog, having long been ignored despite its eager attention, finally gave up and settled down at Edwin's feet, slumping over with a tired sigh, rolling onto its side, and looking up with wide, pleading eyes straight at him. Though the man in the wheelchair remained expressionless, Derek could sense that his fingers seemed to relax slightly, as if wanting to lift up, but ultimately holding back the urge under control. Derek couldn't help but wonder, why doesn't Edwin have a dog? If it were Edwin, a Doberman or German Shepherd would suit him perfectly. Proudly standing by his side, like a powerful figure making an entrance. "Troublesome," Edwin said coldly. Derek was about to say more when suddenly, a fast galloping sound came from outside the pavilion. Without even turning around, he knew who had returned. Oh no. This really is going to become an intense situation. William stormed off his horse with fierce energy, and the moment he saw them, a wave of anger flared up from within. "Today was definitely a mistake to come out," he said sarcastically, frowning and glaring at the golden retriever by Edwin's feet. "Big Pancake, get over here right now. Don't you know how much they dislike you? You keep rushing toward him every day." Hearing that name, Derek couldn't hold back and let out a soft chuckle. William shot him a fierce glare, but perhaps due to Edwin's imposing presence, he surprisingly didn't explode this time. After calling the dog over, he muttered through gritted teeth, "You're not any better yourself." Then he turned and walked away, dragging the leash behind him without a backward glance. Derek was truly surprised by how easily he left. His eyes followed William's, retreating back in disbelief. "What are you staring at?" Edwin asked, looking at the dog. Derek paused, then added, "Actually, I was wondering when we came up here earlier, I thought I saw another facility around this place. I haven't played with local dogs before. I just wanted to take a look at what wealthy people do every day, and it's about lunchtime. Anyway," Derek said, glancing at Austin, "let's find somewhere to eat first. Edwin, want to join us?" Edwin lifted his eyelids and stared at him with a heavy gaze. Derek hesitantly said, "How about joining us?" Edwin lowered his eyes. The Halfway Horse Ranch is part of the Eugene estate, which also includes a hotel, golf course, and other facilities. Coincidentally, Moo Group is the largest shareholder of the Eugene estate. That's why Derek always felt William's horse seemed far smarter and more obedient than his own. It was clearly a specially chosen mount for the family's young master. As soon as the hotel attendant spotted Edwin, he immediately greeted him with respect and led them into the dining area. Today, for some unknown reason, several groups of idle wealthy youths from City A had suddenly decided to come here just to join in the scene. Even while walking, Derek spotted a few young men wearing high-end designer clothes. They seemed to recognize Edwin, but only stopped briefly to glance from afar without daring to approach. While Austin wasn't looking, Derek quietly stepped forward a few paces and asked casually, "Did Mr. Moo receive my gift?" Edwin looked up at him briefly and replied in a neutral tone, "Yes." "Did Mr. Moo like it?" Derek asked with hopeful eyes. "It might not be very valuable, but I spent quite some time picking it out. I wanted to thank him for helping me at the dinner party and sorting out Daniel's situation." Edwin paused for a moment. Derek glanced quickly toward Austin, who was now looking their way, and his palms instinctively grew damp. Then Edwin finally said, "It's acceptable." He finally let out a breath. "That means you liked it," Derek said lazily. "This is the first time I've ever picked something this expensive. I was worried I'd get scammed or overcharged." Edwin let out a soft chuckle. The waiter led them to a window seat, where they could see distant hills and vast grasslands through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But right nearby was William, along with his usual crowd of companions, who had just left earlier. Noticing a friend's nudge, William glanced over briefly, then quickly looked away as if nothing had happened. Pretending they weren't there, Derek didn't pay much attention. After sitting down, he quietly lifted a corner of the menu to peek. Prices were still within his budget, but most of the dish names were completely unfamiliar. He silently slid the menu over toward Austin, deciding he'd just go along with whatever they chose. But before Edwin could even speak, the gentle violin music in the restaurant suddenly shifted into a soft, emotional song, and the singer's voice sounded oddly familiar. Edwin and Austin paused mid-flip of the menu. Austin turned slightly to look at Derek. Before Derek could figure out what that glance meant, he heard someone from the table next to William say, "I remember Edwin used to boast about staying true to writing only classical music he truly cared about. How come now he's chasing trends and singing such shallow pop songs?" The man straightened up, deliberately raising his voice as if making sure they heard. No wonder Derek would switch sides so easily. The speaker was a well-known music critic in the industry, apparently the only son of a wealthy entrepreneur from City A. His name was Ezra. He had been sent overseas at a young age and studied at a prestigious music school. During his time abroad, Ezra often hosted live streams reviewing new album releases, earning a loyal following thanks to his sharp and candid critiques. But after he harshly criticized William's latest album, the same day he was confronted by Derek, the notorious fan of William, in a heated live stream showdown that left him thoroughly embarrassed, which sparked lasting resentment toward both men. He wasn't here with William today. Probably just happened to run into him at the restaurant. Unexpectedly, all the rivals ended up together, so he decided to go live and call them out directly. The air seemed to still for a moment. Derek, who had been lounging casually against the back of his chair, paused slightly. Then he calmly placed his hand on the edge of the table, hiding the faint smirk at his lips, while the other reached to refill his teacup. The soft murmurs around the restaurant gradually quieted down. It seemed some people had noticed the tension nearby and discreetly glanced over. Austin frowned, his eyes flashing coldly toward the other table, about to speak, only for Derek to gently stop him. Really? What's so serious? Why bother with them? Derek chuckled lightly, appearing completely unfazed by the provocation. Austin hesitated, but when he finished his tea and looked up, there was no trace of a smile left. If Ezra had said something else, Derek wouldn't have taken it so personally. But this comment hit right where it hurt. William, how do you always end up with such lively little show-offs? Derek glanced toward the table, speaking in a calm but pointed tone. No idea where that need to stand out comes from. Can almost smell it from here, like someone desperate for attention. The other side fell silent for an instant. The man clearly hadn't expected Derek to respond so directly. His expression darkened, and he shot back. Speaking up for him like that. Guess you're not as loyal to your old promises from the recent buzz as everyone thought. Still hung up on him, aren't you? Derek let out a short laugh and didn't play along. Instead, he said, I really can't stand people who constantly preach about their original intention. They act like they're above it all, like they've never known real hardship. William doesn't need to win over his fans. Should he be trying to please you, some clueless stranger? Or are you planning to cover every last cent of the classical music project's production costs, promotion budget, and future royalties? Derek rolled his eyes. If original intention could feed you, what would you have in your mouth right now? Wind from the northwest. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached exactly where it needed to, each word dripping with sarcasm. Derek! The man slammed his hand on the table and turned red in the face. Derek tilted his head, looking innocent. What? Did I hit a nerve? Sorry, I'm not very good at holding back, though compared to you, I still have room to improve. Ezra was speechless, frozen in place. He clenched his jaw as if trying to regain control, but Derek's laid-back, indifferent expression only made him even more frustrated. Just as he was still searching for the right words, William finally spoke up. Ezra, if you're bored with the summons I sent you before, feel free to keep going. But don't drag him into this just to upset me. Hearing that, Ezra immediately shifted his focus toward William and, after a long pause, forced out through gritted teeth. So you're not immune either? Derek almost laughed at the sight. Someone copying someone else's style right there on the spot. Just as he was about to fire off another sarcastic remark, Edwin stepped in first. Enough, he said calmly. There was no sharp edge like the others, yet his words carried an unshakable authority. Derek gave him a casual glance without showing anything, then leaned back lazily in his seat, feigning indifference. Ezra clenched his fists in frustration, glared at Derek, and finally sat down without another word, but he kept muttering under his breath. No wonder he stopped fawning over William. He's clearly moved up in the world. Edwin glanced at Derek, who was pretending not to notice as he poured himself another cup of tea, then tapped his fingers lightly on the table. Derek looked up in confusion, then suddenly remembered what Ezra had said earlier. Oh no, when signing the agreement, Edwin had made it clear he didn't like hearing this kind of talk. Derek's grip tightened on his cup as he thought about how to calm his boss down. When suddenly Edwin calmly closed the menu and said, "Let's go somewhere else." Derek immediately understood. He shot up from his seat, hurried over to stand behind Edwin's wheelchair, and gripped the handles. He leaned down, his cheek brushing lightly against Edwin's ear, pressing gently along the side of his face with a soft, lingering touch. His voice came out low and tender. "Sure thing, sweetheart. I upset you last night. I'll go wherever you want today." Even Derek nearly shuddered at how awkward it sounded. He glanced over at William and Ezra, who stood frozen nearby, and asked with a smirk, "What are you staring at? Didn't you already know I've moved on? Or did you come here just to confirm it?" Seeing his point had been made, Derek called out to Austin and casually pushed the wheelchair out of the restaurant. But no one noticed as the glass door closed. William gave a fleeting glance behind him, his expression unreadable, as if something heavy was trapped on the tip of his tongue. Edwin remained silent throughout the ride. Derek wasn't sure how he'd taken what had just happened and quietly asked, "So, where should we go now?" At last, Edwin turned his head slightly to look back at him. Without sunlight to soften it, his eyes were astonishingly dark. like endless pools where tangled roots swirl beneath the surface, threatening to pull anyone who looks too long into an abyss from which there's no escape. Yet something else flickered within them, a restless fire dancing beneath the surface, so complicated that it was impossible to tell what he might be thinking. Derek's heartbeat skipped for a moment, and his palm grew damp where he gripped the wheelchair handle. Edwin's gaze drifted over his profile, each second feeling heavier than the last. Just as Derek saw his lips part as if about to speak, Edwin suddenly turned away and said with a teasing tone, "You were the one who upset me, so you decide." Derek ran his tongue over dry lips, then glanced at Austin, who had caught up beside them, still remembering why they'd taken this day off. Then, back home. In the end, they actually went to Edwin's house. Throughout the journey, Austin had several thoughts of just leaving instead, but every time he saw Derek focused on his phone, browsing through recipes, he ended up swallowing the words that kept forming on his lips. Austin and he were both public figures, so places like Eugene Villa with their privacy were fine, but in any other public setting, they'd likely be trending for a full day if even slightly careless, especially with Edwin being so hard to miss. Besides, Derek and Austin still had their mission to complete. He couldn't think of any quiet places besides home where they could spend time together without drawing attention. After all, Edwin showed no intention of leaving, so it would have seemed odd if either of them tried to send the other away. Luckily, when Derek asked, Edwin agreed right away. The result was that the three of them ended up sharing a rather unusual lunch in Edwin's dining room. Of course, it wasn't possible for someone like the boss to cook, but Austin hadn't expected Derek to be just as skilled at handling tasks as he was after years of experience out in the field. One washed, one chopped, one cooked, and one arranged and served. Their teamwork flowed smoothly, almost like a pair of brothers who'd grown up together. After lunch, the living room was left in peaceful silence. Edwin sat alone on his wheelchair by the window, reading a book. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling glass, softly outlining his figure. His expression remained calm and distant, appearing focused, yet it was impossible to tell what he might be thinking. When Derek came out to pour water for Austin, he stole a glance, wondering why Edwin hadn't gone back to his study or bedroom, but decided not to ask. Instead, he eagerly rushed into the room. "Here you are. Have you died yet? Can we start the next round?" Austin gave him a tired look, pointing at the animated figure still moving on screen. "It might take another 20 minutes, he said slowly. Derek's eyes widened. "I always die at this stage. How are you able to hold on so long?" Austin, with his strong features and steady gaze, was actually a gaming prodigy. Derek let out a sigh and flopped onto the bed. He casually called up the AI from his phone to open the Bluebird asterisk, flipping to the passage where the brothers interacted, then asked it to read that part again. As the sun dipped westward, they played a few more rounds. Riding on their excitement, they began reciting lines from a script until the sky was painted with wide stretches of soft, peach-colored light. Only then did Austin finally rub his sore thighs and politely decline Derek's dinner invite before leaving. But before leaving, he casually glanced toward the wheelchair rolling into the study, as if lost in thought. Unaware of it, Derek stretched his stiff limbs and stumbled drowsily to the study to ask Edwin what he'd like for dinner, only to learn that Edwin had already ordered meals ahead of time. This time it didn't go wrong like before. If not for wanting to keep some dignity, Derek would have happily scraped the plate clean, right down to the last bit of grilled beef tongue slices and osmanthus jelly. Probably because his schedule had been packed all day, Derek fell asleep earlier than expected that night. He'd assumed he could sleep straight through until morning and then show up at the set feeling refreshed and alert. But suddenly, in the middle of the night, he heard a noise. Derek snapped awake and shot open his eyes. Someone was standing by the bed. Moonlight spilled across the floor, tiny dust particles drifting in the pale beams. A faint shadow swayed slightly against one wall, silhouetted by someone standing motionless beside the bed, seemingly staring right at him. Derek's heart leapt. His breath caught in his throat. He strained to adjust to the dark, but his mind raced with countless thoughts. For a split second, he almost lunged up, ready to act first no matter what. But when he recognized the face, every urge vanished instantly. Derek hesitantly called out, "Edwin." The figure said nothing, eyes wide open, dark and deep like the ocean. His gaze drifted slowly over Derek's face for a few seconds, then turned gently toward the window. Derek snapped, fully awake, his heart pounding. He followed where the man was looking, only to see the quiet night outside. A few windows across distant skyscrapers were lit here and there. Stars hung scattered in a dark sky, everything utterly still. What's so interesting about that? Derek stared at him in confusion for 2 seconds, then turned back and flicked on the bedside lamp. Warm golden light suddenly filled the bed, and Edwin's figure finally came into clear view. Edwin, Edwin, Derek whispered uncertainly. What are you doing? The man by the bed had his eyes slightly lowered, with no expression on his face. He stood there, his demeanor like a puppet whose winding mechanism had been removed, silent and hollow. Derek's head buzzed with a sudden rush. He hesitated before moving closer, whispering to himself in a hushed tone, "Are you sleepwalking?" But how could someone sleepwalking even stand up? What kind of medical mystery is this? Derek thought with a strange idea. Did he walk all the way from his own room like this? Derek felt momentarily lost, his mind flashing through scattered thoughts. Sleepwalkers shouldn't be awakened forcefully. It could cause serious distress. He forced himself to stay calm, but a ridiculous thought still surfaced. What if it's not sleepwalking at all? His fingers hovered in midair, neither daring to touch nor able to walk away. He kept his gaze fixed on Edwin's face, holding back the rising wave of unease. The other man remained in a rigid pose, his eyes now seeming to return to Derek. Derek stayed propped up on the bed, looking up at him, wondering whether the dream version of Edwin might also reflect his own image. Something that felt oddly intriguing. Did he even know he had sleepwalking tendencies? Derek wondered, or did he realize he could stand up while dreaming? The next moment, Edwin suddenly took a step forward. Derek jumped up and quickly grabbed Edwin's arm. "Don't wander around. What if you fall?" Edwin seemed not to hear, turning his hand to grip Derek's wrist instead, then stepping forward on his own and sitting down on the bed. When awake, he was always restrained and distant, his eyes holding a layer of ice, as if pushing people away with every step. But now, whether it was the faint frown creasing his brow or the strength in his hold, everything felt utterly real. So real it left him speechless. In the original story, the seemingly unshakable and cold antagonist had once experienced something deeply private and vulnerable. Who are you thinking about? What could it be that haunts your thoughts even in dreams? Under Derek's calm presence, Edwin seemed to relax a little. Derek couldn't help but murmur quietly, "What did you dream about?" Morning light slowly chased away the darkness in the room. When Derek opened his eyes, his thoughts were still hazy. He spun them around for several seconds before gradually regaining clarity, only to be startled again by the weight on his shoulder. A small movement made him realize he was curled completely into Edwin's arms, limbs entwined. The events of the previous night flooded back in a wave. Derek's face instantly burned. The warm breath from his companion brushed against his neck, sending shivers down his spine and making him feel flustered. He froze where he was, too close to move without creating even more awkwardness. What kind of mess is this? Derek mumbled with a sigh, surrendering and lying still like a fish left out to dry. But he couldn't just stay like this. He was thinking about pretending to panic and yelling to wake Edwin first. After all, he was the one caught off guard. If he claimed he didn't know anything, Edwin wouldn't be able to press further and let him figure it out on his own. But as soon as that thought formed, he sensed Edwin's steady breathing suddenly pause. Without thinking, Derek turned his head right into Edwin's eyes. Just waking up, the confusion and fog in those eyes vanished completely, a stark contrast to the hollow, lost look from last night under dim light. Now awake, Edwin was calm and restrained, once again wrapped in an unshakable chill. His gaze settled on Derek's face, and the complex emotions in his eyes were like a hidden current beneath deep-sea waves, making it impossible to read his thoughts for a moment. Derek's eyes darted around as he mentally rehearsed his response right on the tip of his tongue. But Edwin's calm voice cut in sharply. "What are you doing in my bed?" What a perfect example of blaming the victim. How could he end up being the one accused of invading someone else's bed? Derek nearly burst into laughter. The question left him speechless for a moment, feeling as if he'd been pricked and deflated. Only scattered emotions floating around in his chest. He opened his mouth to retort, but on one hand, he reminded himself that the client was still king. If Edwin thought he was mocking him, things would get awkward. On the other hand, he feared accidentally revealing last night's events and adding more embarrassment. So he took a deep breath and replied in as neutral a tone as possible. "Don't you think this question should be coming from me instead?" As he said it, he quickly glanced around the room and gave Edwin an unspoken look that clearly meant, "Look, this is my room." Edwin's brow twitched slightly. He pushed himself up with a hand on the bed and slowly sat upright. Derek quietly looked down at his legs, noticing they felt just as weak as before. Yet even so, Edwin's movements remained relaxed and graceful. The faint morning light streaming through the window outlined his silhouette with soft clarity, almost like a painting. "What happened last night?" Edwin asked in a tone that was neither interested nor dismissive. Derek swallowed hard, his heartbeat quickening. He had no idea how much Edwin remembered from last night or where to begin. After all, saying something like, "You wandered in your sleep and held onto my hand tightly while clinging to me," would sound less like flirtation and more like a child's plea for comfort. "Nothing really special," Derek said with a nervous chuckle, changing the subject as he ran his fingers through his messy hair. "You might have been sleepwalking, or something like that." "Sleepwalking?" Edwin raised an eyebrow, a flicker of unusual emotion flashing in his eyes before returning to his usual composed calm. "I don't remember." He lowered his eyes, staring at his legs as if trying to recall something, yet found nothing. Derek noticed his brows drawing tighter, then rubbed the back of his nose and went on with a hesitant tone. "You came to my room last night, stood by the bed for a while, and then..." He paused, trying to keep his voice as neutral as possible. "You held onto my arm and insisted on staying in my bed." The moment he finished speaking, he saw Edwin suddenly lift his eyelids, as if silently assessing the truth behind his words. "Just that," Edwin said with a flat tone, but Derek couldn't help feeling uneasy, like someone had exposed his lie. "Just that. Nothing else happened." He nodded rapidly, trying to appear completely at ease to hide his nervousness, but his right hand couldn't help brushing against the left wrist that had been tightly gripped the night before. Edwin gave a quiet reply, as if finally accepting the explanation, though his expression remained thoughtful. Unaware of it, Derek exhaled in relief and was about to get out of bed when he felt a sudden pressure around his waist. He looked down and realized Edwin's hand had landed right on the hem of his loose pajamas. For no clear reason, Derek instinctively froze. His heartbeat surged, and he could almost hear the steady thud inside his chest. "Would you mind keeping your hand there a little longer?" Derek asked cautiously. Edwin paused, then finally turned his gaze back to Derek. Following the direction of his eyes, he noticed his own hand resting by accident. His expression stayed unchanged, but he quietly let go. "Sorry," he said lightly, with no hint of emotion. "I didn't know I had this habit before, but since I ended up staying here on my own." "You don't need to be so tense." Derek, already yanking his pajama hem back, couldn't help but protest. "I'm not nervous." "Is that so?" Edwin gave a soft laugh. "Then that's good." Derek had no idea why, but he suddenly felt like he'd been playfully teased. He couldn't quite name the feeling, so he just gave in with a quiet sigh. He shot Edwin a quick side eye, pressed his lips together, and slid off the bed before grabbing his jacket and pulling it on. Just as he was about to slip away, he heard Edwin call out to him. "Derek," Edwin said calmly, "besides what you just mentioned, did I do anything else, or say anything out of the ordinary?" Derek stumbled slightly, nearly losing his balance. He recalled that ambiguous gift from last night, unsure what it referred to, but instinctively wanted to keep quiet about it. "No, you didn't say anything," he said with a stiff smile, turning back and quickly grabbing his half-zipped jacket before hurrying away. Edwin watched him vanish into the distance, then slowly looked down at his open palms resting on his lap. His fingers curled slightly, as if still feeling the warmth from last night. He let out a soft, unreadable chuckle, and just then heard hurried footsteps outside the bedroom. Derek lowered his head and wheeled in Edwin's chair, stammering, "Can you manage on your own?" Edwin asked back, "If I said no, would you help me?" Derek paused for a moment, then quietly offered his arm. Edwin glanced at him briefly before placing his hand firmly on Derek's forearm. His movements were slow as he stood up, and Derek kept his gaze fixed ahead, pretending to be just a steady support. But in that instant when their eyes met, his thoughts became completely scattered. It felt like he was being drawn into Edwin's gaze. Maybe it was just his imagination, but for a fleeting second, something unreadable passed through Edwin's eyes, then vanished as if it had never been there. "Thank you." Derek stepped back politely, watching as Edwin guided the wheelchair out of the room. He had thought his biggest challenge after arriving in this world would be avoiding the original plot and staying alive. But he hadn't expected to face an Edwin completely different from how he was described in the book. "Whatever," Derek muttered, rubbing his face hard, trying to clear away these confusing thoughts. His heart kept racing, as if a single drop of water had splashed into hot oil, sending out countless tiny ripples that refused to settle. Even after washing up and getting into Jack's car, Derek still clearly remembered the hushed words from last night. His gift, what could it possibly be? Jack drove into the set, muttering under his breath, "Finally getting to shoot outdoors somewhere new. I stayed up last night to catch up on this scene." Benjamin's group followed the trail of dissipating spiritual energy all the way to Chongqing Town by the Huai River and stumbled upon a river god wedding, with sword flying and diving into water again today. "Derek, you're in for some real trouble." The filming location was along an unnamed stretch of river inside the movie studio, where Oliver was already bustling around at the center of the set, directing staff as lighting and set crew scrambled to adjust their equipment. Derek quickly changed into his costume, then followed instructions from crew members to secure his harness before stepping onto the wooden boat. The red veil settled over his head, blocking out all sight. Derek touched the prop sword at his waist to check its position, then signaled Oliver with a hand gesture meant to say, "I'm ready." This scene had Benjamin's group tracking down the mysterious collapse of spiritual energy in Zhongzhou when they happened upon Chongqing Town, only to find that instead of festive lights and celebration during the Lantern Festival, the town was eerily quiet and lifeless. Amelia questioned a local resident and learned that the river, long their family's lifeline, had birthed a river god who demanded a young woman as bride every 3 months, or else flood the entire town. Lucas and Amelia refused to believe in such a wicked spirit and immediately wanted to investigate by going into the water, but Benjamin stopped them. "Tomorrow's the river god's wedding day," he said. "Let's just wait patiently." But no one expected that by the next day, it was not the originally chosen bride who boarded the wooden boat as required, but Benjamin in disguise. Derek sat upright and repeated to himself several times, It's fine. The pay for playing a woman is way higher." Still, the wedding attire felt overly tight and restrictive. It made him feel quite uncomfortable. "Action!" Oliver's voice cut through the cold wind on the river. Derek instantly calmed himself, pushing aside all his inner turmoil and confusion. By the time he looked up, his entire demeanor had fully shifted into Benjamin's character. The small boat gradually drifted toward the heart of the mountain range, where beyond layers of mist stood an ancient pavilion with graceful water features. Sensing the chill in the air around him, Benjamin slowly tightened his fingers resting on his leg, until he saw a man wearing a silver mask appear directly ahead of the boat. "Madam, I've been waiting here for quite some time," the man said in a rough, mocking tone. Benjamin remained silent, nodding slightly while looking up at the figure before him. "It's a malevolent spirit. Be careful," he silently communicated to Amelia and Lucas hiding in the shadows. The boat docked beside the pavilion. As the man reached out to guide him ashore, Benjamin swiftly drew his flexible sword from his waist and struck at the man's vital point. Yet, in an instant, a heavy object crashed to the ground. The man was split in half, but on the ground lay only a crimson wedding gown, completely empty inside with no trace of flesh or blood. Benjamin's brow furrowed sharply. The wedding robe instantly shattered from spiritual force, revealing his pure white undergarments beneath. At the same time, water splashed violently on the river surface. Water jets surged upward like coiled dragons aimed straight at Benjamin. He stepped back to dodge, but another jet came rushing in, while the first one kept closing in. He swung his sword and leapt into the air. 5 or 6 serpentine water jets erupted from the river around him, encircling him within a small area. No matter how he rose higher with his sword, those water jets instantly shot up to match his height. "Brother, I'm coming to help." But the spirit's power was far greater than that. In an instant, as Lucas just reached the pavilion on his sword, he barely managed to cast a spell-breaking talisman before feeling his weapon drag down. He plunged straight into the water. Amelia snapped, "I told you not to bring him along." He's more trouble than help. The water column dissipated after being struck by the barrier-breaking talisman, and Benjamin managed to free himself. Amelia, hold them off for a moment. Lucas can't swim. I'll go rescue him. Immediately afterward, Benjamin leapt into the water. 10 minutes later, Derek pulled Austin safely onto the shore. The weather in early December was icy cold. Derek knelt on the riverbank, taking a few deep breaths, his exhales forming visible clouds of mist. "Are you all right?" Austin asked with concern. Derek shook his head, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. "Not at all. If I get sick from this, does that count as a work injury?" His soaked white undershirt clung tightly to his body, outlining his slender yet strong waist and toned backside. His thin shoulders still trembled, and the exposed skin on his arms and neck had turned pale. His hair hung in wet strands across his face, dripping water from the ends. His lips were bright red, almost like they'd been stained by a deep berry, while an intense shade of color ran along the outer corners of his eyes, giving him a striking, otherworldly look. Ava stood beside Oliver, holding the newly revised script. She watched Jack rush over to wrap Derek in a towel, her eyes sparkling with quiet excitement. After a pause, she asked, "Are we certain about the scene from Phantom Dreams?" Oliver glanced at her and said, "You know the answer already. You're clearly more eager than I am." Ava gave no response. Back in the changing room, Derek changed into dry clothes, then had to drink 3 cups of ginger tea under Jack's careful supervision. His tongue felt numb from it all, but before he could lie down for a rest, he heard Ava's voice outside the door. "Derek, are you free? I'd like to talk to you about something." Derek told Jack to open the door. He lifted his head with a dull expression and caught sight of the script in Ava's hand, suddenly getting a bad feeling. This situation felt oddly familiar. "So you're saying I have to play both Owen and his underlings, the Shadow Wraiths, in the main storyline?" Ava flopped down beside Derek with a relaxed ease, giving him a knowing smile before handing him the script. Derek took the script, his hands still cold. When he opened the first page, several bold words stared back at him. "The Suju City Revised Plan." Mason wasn't already hired for Owen? Derek swallowed hard, slowly moving his eyes down the page. Why all of a sudden? Mason only came in temporarily to avoid delaying Levi's schedule, but his fee was just too high. Owen is the main antagonist in the Suju City arc, and we simply can't afford him for real filming. However, Oliver and I both believe that by now, Owen has already gone too far down the path of imitating Benjamin. He needs to mirror Benjamin while staying true to his own character. That's a tough act, and there aren't many actors available with both the schedule and skill level we need, so it makes sense for the real person to step in. "Derek, please help us out." Derek's scalp tingled, and he instinctively started to refuse. After finally getting close to wrapping up the work, only to be handed more tasks out of nowhere. That feeling, he never wanted to experience it again in his life. "No way," Derek said, flipping the script shut with a shaky hand, his smile looking worse than tears. "I remember there are lots of scenes with Shadow Wraiths in Suju City. I really don't want to work overtime," Ava said. "It's not many, only 3 scenes total." Oliver already cut down the lines, and we're focusing most of the filming on Lucas. Derek gritted his teeth as he flipped open the script and quickly scanned it, realizing all 3 scenes were intense emotional performances. Lucas and Amelia chasing after the old soul-calling ritual from Chongqing Village to Suju City, only to fall into a trap set by the Shadow Wraiths and confront a figure wearing Benjamin's face. Derek's mind went blank with shock. No, that's way too difficult. You should find someone else." Ava frowned slightly and lowered her head with a pained expression. "But Derek, the blue bird feels like my own child. I didn't have a choice before, but now that we finally have the chance, I want to do everything I can to bring this story to life. Honestly, I don't know who else could take on this role. Please help me," she added with a trembling voice and watery eyes. "And don't you think the chemistry between Lucas and Fuxing is really compelling? That tension between emotion and reason, good versus evil, especially after your performance in Chongqing Town. I'm certain this scene will become unforgettable, but that spirit is a woman. How am I supposed to act out something like this with Austin? After it airs, my fans will never let me hear the end of it. Please, Derek." Derek wasn't tough to handle when things got emotional. He hated it when women played on his sympathy. He was completely stunned by Ava's words and turned to Jack for help, only to see him instantly turn away, signaling he couldn't help either. "Well, I guess I'll do it." Derek sighed heavily, finally giving in. "But this comes with a different fee." Ava's face lit up instantly, her eyes sparkling with hope. "No problem. I'll contact your team right away." Oliver said, "If you're on board, we can increase the pay even more." Why wasn't this mentioned earlier? Oh no. I missed my chance to negotiate. Derek sighed helplessly. "When's this scene going to be shot?" Ava glanced at her watch and said cheerfully, "Tonight." Derek nearly spit out his ginger tea. "Even farm donkeys work less crazily than this? It won't be a problem. Luna specifically asked that you get some rest so you'll have energy for the evening shoot." Ava glanced at the tense look on his face and added, "The filming location is just nearby. There's great lighting and atmosphere there. John will arrive early to check out the setup, so Derek can come a bit later. No rush." Derek felt completely overwhelmed, but just minutes later, when he opened the script, his eyes immediately landed on the description of Ingwe Fu's entrance. She was dressed in traditional Nuo opera attire, her face strikingly captivating, with a red mark at her forehead and deep crimson along her eyelids. Leaning against an old lantern, she gave Lucas a gaze that seemed to pull you into its depths. Night fell, and the filming location had been transformed into an abandoned mountain temple. Crumbling ruins surrounded them, with vines crawling everywhere. Mist curled through the dark woods, while moonlight filtered through swaying branches, casting shifting shadows that made the whole scene feel increasingly eerie. In Lucas's memories, though they had failed in their battle against the river spirit, they unexpectedly discovered a spell formation in an empty pavilion. The formation continuously gathered spiritual energy from all around and sent it off to some unknown place. After returning to the town for investigation, they found another similar formation beneath a shrine at the center of Chongqing village. It was this very mechanism that had been drawing all of the village's spiritual and earth energies toward the pavilion's spell site outside. The one who cast the spell was a wandering Taoist monk. 10 years ago, Chongqing village had suddenly been plagued by a month-long night of ghostly disturbances. Families couldn't sleep as spirits roamed freely. No matter how many priests and monks were called in, none could calm the chaos. It wasn't until this traveling monk arrived and used 3 9-year-old boys as offerings to set up what was known as the Soul Passage Formation. The so-called river spirit within the pavilion was actually born from the accumulated resentment of those 3 young souls who had died unjustly. Benjamin once investigated the source of the drained spiritual energy, and all clues pointed to the Shin family in Suzhou. However, before he could investigate their home, he died trapped in a perilous spell. 50 years later, under the planning of his remaining 4 friends, the old case was reopened. Lucas personally began his journey toward Suzhou, but on the mountain road into town, he ran into a nightmare demon that Owen had secretly stationed as an ambush. Derek stood before the mirror in the dressing room, glancing down at his outfit. His face half hidden by a mask whose bold patterns made his eyes appear especially intense and captivating. His long hair was partially tied up with a hairpin, with several strands deliberately left loose across his forehead, adding a touch of careless charm. He wore a vibrant red long-sleeved robe, with delicate bells and ribbons hanging from his waist, gently swaying as he moved. "Perfect," Ava said, her eyes wide with awe. "This look is unreal. I'd drop to my knees if I were Lucas and saw this. I don't know if Lucas would kneel or not," Derek said with a weary sigh, "but I'll bow to you and Luna right now." The large lights around the set came on, and Derek stepped outside the shrine, adjusting his robe. The camera started rolling, and Oliver gave the signal to begin filming. Derek quickly slipped into character, stepping slowly into the ruined mountain god shrine. The bright chime of the bells mingled with a wind that sounded like distant children crying. A strange, eerie melody. His movements were graceful to the point of being dreamlike. His long sleeves fluttered in the cold breeze, and the mask on his face glowed vividly under the dim light. Lucas stood at the center of the shrine, holding a sword, scanning the surroundings with caution. Dressed in a pale moon-white robe, his handsome face looked especially sharp beneath the cold glow, his expression radiating clear anger and restless impatience. Ever since entering this forest, he had lost track of Amelia. No matter how cleverly he tried to find her, he couldn't get any sign. feeling as though he were trapped in a maze, endlessly circling around the shrine without ever escaping. Master Xie. Even though he knew voiceover would be added later by the team, Derek deliberately lowered his tone and called out softly. His voice carried a hint of amusement. Though it wasn't particularly smooth, there was something strangely compelling about it. Lucas turned toward the sound, and what met his eyes was a striking shade of red. He blinked slightly, then quickly suppressed the fleeting surprise that had flickered in his gaze. A momentary, inappropriate reaction. Finally, he regained composure. "Who are you? It seems you don't wish to see me," Derek said, brushing a strand of hair from his face with a teasing edge in his voice. "Or perhaps you're hoping for someone else? Even a spirit dares speak of beauty? Why don't you check yourself in the mirror first?" Lucas scoffed, but his sword never loosened its grip. Derek moved forward slowly, each step graceful like lotus blossoms blooming. The red robe swayed gently as the soft chimes of the bells rang out with quiet intensity. He circled Lucas once, then spoke in a hushed, tender tone. "Master Xie, why so tense? I've come here on a single mission." Lucas remained calm. "What is it you want to know?" Derek suddenly stopped, his hand gently resting on the sword. Fine blade. No wonder it was forged by the renowned Benjamin of old. Lucas's expression darkened. He twisted his wrist, instantly sending the shadowy figure flying several paces away. His sword slid free from its sheath, blade pointing straight at Derek. "No more talk. What do you really want?" Derek waved his sleeve lightly, effortlessly deflecting Lucas's blade. He tilted his head with a faint smile. "Why get upset? Lucas, I just want to hear the truth about the fire at Xie Manor all those years ago," Derek said with a calm smile, stepping slowly toward Lucas. "How did you manage to escape from the perilous formation that required one person's sacrifice to save an entire city? How did Benjamin, the brilliant prodigy of his time, meet his end?" "What are you talking about?" Before he could finish speaking, a ribbon shot out from Derek's sleeve like a swift serpent, wrapping around Lucas's wrist. Lucas's eyes flickered with surprise. The sword hadn't even been raised when his body froze in place. "Lucas, how did you survive back then?" Derek murmured softly. "Lucas carries a fated destiny, entwined with the calamity of Central Lands. I just didn't have that kind of fortune. I couldn't stay by your side always. Otherwise, we might have faced this storm together." With that, Derek slowly lifted his mask. In that instant, the face hidden beneath the mask was fully revealed under the cold moonlight. A familiar gentle shape from memory, fused with eerie and captivating crimson inscriptions, leaving Lucas momentarily stunned. The sword fell to the ground with a clear, sharp sound. Lucas stood frozen, his gaze locked onto the face before him, his pupils tightly contracted with disbelief. Derek sensed the other's emotions had reached their peak, and he let out a quiet breath of relief. Gently slowing his movements, he circled slowly around Lucas, walking with graceful ease that seemed untouched by the world, while his voice grew increasingly eerie and gentle. "So, Lucas still remembers my face." Derek's voice carried an eerie, unsettling charm. "Lucas, don't you think it's fate that we've met like this?" Lucas gritted his teeth, a flash of pain crossing his eyes as he forced back his emotions and snapped. "You're not him. My brother Benjamin died protecting the people of Insan City long ago. You don't deserve to wear his face. Change it right now." Derek seemed amused by this defiant outburst. He lifted a hand and gently brushed his cheek, the fingertip stained with hibiscus juice tracing over the markings and dried traces on his face. His tone shifted suddenly to one of deliberate sorrow. "Yes, Lucas, I am gone, but I can't accept it. 183 lives, mine, my mother's, my father's, all lost for what? Have you really forgotten?" Lucas went pale at the words. His lips trembled slightly, parting as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Derek noticed this small hesitation, and his smile deepened into something unsettling. With a sudden twist, he spun away, the edge of his robe brushing against the ground as the ribbon wrapping around Lucas echoed faintly through the empty temple. "Lucas," his voice floated lightly into the silent night. "Do you really want to kill me? I've waited so long just to see you again. Don't you want to know the truth about the Xie family, about Chongqing town, about yourself?" The bells rang out softly, like a mother's lullaby. Lucas kept his eyes lowered, unresponsive. as if already sinking into memories under some unseen spell. But before he finished speaking, silence was shattered by a flash of blade. The crumbling statue in the mountain shrine exploded outward. "Lucas, pay attention. Don't you dare mistake some stray dog for Benjamin. He'd be furious from beyond the grave if he heard you call that fool his brother." Amelia's voice surged into his mind, and Lucas snapped awake. The sword on the ground responded to the call, shooting back into his hand like a falling star. The ribbon binding him burst apart with a surge of spiritual force, tiny bells scattering across the temple floor. He raised his eyes, his gaze like an icy blade aimed straight at the red figure ahead. Without another word, he turned sharply and placed the sword against Derek's neck. Derek didn't understand how he had broken free, a flicker of confusion crossing his face, but he quickly composed himself, lowering his eyes to the blade's tip and curling his lips into a faint smile. "Lucas, what are you still protecting? It's just a mockery." Lucas clenched his jaw hard, the veins on his forehead bulging. He tried to speak back, but felt as though something had locked his throat. No sound would come out. The endless flames, the centuries-old legacy of the Xie family. Everything eventually returns to dust and earth. False. He wasn't his elder brother. Lucas closed his eyes, as if visions of his final moment with Benjamin 50 years ago surfaced in his mind. If Benjamin's spirit could be reborn, what kind of family would he come into? Just as long as it's not someone who has to deal with a troublesome younger brother like me. Derek suddenly let out a soft laugh, the sound drifting through the empty temple like an eerie chime. "Then kill me, Lucas. I've had enough pain. I won't feel it anymore." Moonlight fell upon Derek's face, making the vivid red scar on his cheek appear even more striking and unnatural. "Do you really think I wouldn't?" Lucas opened his eyes again, launching a sudden attack. He swung his sword down at Derek, but the blade just grazed past his shoulder. In a flash, Derek shifted his position and lunged toward Lucas. With a loud crash, Lucas was pushed back several steps, but the sword on the ground flew straight back into his hand. He panted heavily, the cold tip of the blade once again aimed at Derek. His eyes no longer showed hesitation. "Anyone who falsely claims my elder brother's name to insult the Xie family shall pay with their life." The camera froze on Lucas's blade meeting Derek's cold smirk. Then Oliver's voice rang out. "Cut!" That was too much. The studio lights flared on, and the tense atmosphere vanished with that one word. Derek slumped like a loosened string. As he pulled the mask from the side of his head, he grumbled, "Luna, next time please find someone else for this emotional male-to-female role. I swear my voice feels like I've swallowed 10 roosters." "You did fine." Oliver glanced at Austin beside him and teased. "I saw Austin almost surrender a few times." Austin bit his lip, nudging a pebble with his toe, then offered stiffly, "Those calls of Lucas were really convincing. I almost got fooled myself." Derek turned slightly and glanced at him. Their line of sight brushed past Austin's earlobe, and he asked without thinking, "Are you cold?" Austin blinked in confusion, his gaze flickering, unsure where to settle. "Your ears are red," Derek said offhandedly. Austin paused, instinctively touching his burning earlobe. After a long silence, he gave in and went along with the opening. "A bit cold." But Derek didn't care about the explanation. He just said, "Keep warm," then turned and walked into the lounge. Austin watched his back. A few ribbons dangled from his slender waist, swaying gently with each movement. The tiny bells at their ends rang out clearly. Derek's narrow shoulders and slim frame matched the outfit perfectly when seen from behind, and even more so from the front. He quickly pushed aside those inappropriate thoughts, and right after, Jack's excited voice rang out from the lounge. "Derek, I just took tons of footage. Amazing stuff. Gotta post it on Weibo later for sure. With this look, you're guaranteed to hit the trending charts." Derek's scalp prickled. "Please let me review it first. I really don't want to be called a flashy flirt by Austin's fans or anyone else." "Relax." Jack patted his chest with confidence. "It won't happen." Derek looked at Jack's expression and couldn't quite bring himself to believe it, but as soon as he sat down for a sip of water, not even having warmed the seat yet, Ava's voice came from outside the door. "Derek, we've been thinking about it." The post was made just a few minutes ago, featuring only one video. The video was filmed by a crew member, with several people in the background quietly chuckling. At the start of the video, Derek was dressed as a spectral ghost, his expression cold and distant, holding the green-faced, fanged mask casually by one hand while gripping the red costume's hem with both, striding forward swiftly like a spirit rushing into the mountains. Behind him, writer Ava held her script tightly and ran after him, creating a hilariously exaggerated scene. Derek, just one more scene. Just one. Don't you think it's a shame to let such a cool look go without a proper moment? Derek, if she doesn't get taken out, I'm the one who'll be out. The video continued, showing Derek gradually speeding up. His skirt swayed so fast it blurred slightly, and sleeves flew upward as if chased by something terrifying. The camera suddenly jolted, and the person filming burst out laughing. Derek, why are you running? The scriptwriter's only 5 feet tall. She can't catch you. Derek gave a cold glance over his shoulder and shot back. She might not catch me, but her script sure does fly. Ava clutched the script tightly, clearly unfazed. Derek, just one final scene. You know yourself that there's still something unclear about what happened at Xie Mansion 50 years ago. Derek abruptly stopped in his tracks, turned to face her, and wore an expression of utter defeat. This isn't even about the storyline. Ava blinked rapidly. Then what else could it possibly be? Derek, it's about labor laws and workers' rights. Ava was about to speak again when suddenly, the scene shifted and Oliver's voice boomed into the conversation. Wasting talent is wasting life. Derek, you need some artistic passion. The camera zoomed in on Luna sitting by the monitor, one leg crossed over the other, her hand raised high, speaking with fiery energy as if leading a movement. Derek slowly lifted his eyes, his voice flat. Luna, my idea of artistic passion is just going home after work and lying down to sleep. Those words seemed to trigger something in Oliver. She slammed the table and stood up with a playful grin. How can you possibly sleep at your age, at this stage of life? Before she even finished speaking, Ava had silently crept closer, seizing the moment when Derek was distracted. She grabbed his sleeve and shoved a thick stack of scripts into his arms before he could react. Just take a look, Derek. Once you see it, you'll absolutely want to do it. Derek instinctively took 2 steps back, waving his hands frantically. No, no, no. I've already worked way too many extra hours for you. Extra work means extra pay. Suddenly, the official *Bluebird* account posted a new update. 9 high-resolution stills. Clear proof of the team's strong preference. In the center of the photos, Derek wore a vibrant red costume, silver bells and ribbons wrapped around his slender waist. His face was pale as ghostly white, yet his eyes sparkled with sly amusement, their intensity heightened by streaks of paint and mysterious markings. He stood beneath moonlight in an abandoned temple, a slow trickle of fluid descending from the tip of his finger. As soon as Oliver posted his comment, it caused a major stir on Weibo. Derek's detractors were naturally furious, flooding the top comments with sharp criticism and mockery. Meanwhile, his new fans charged into the comment section like hungry wolves, some screenshotting, others admiring the images crafted by skilled artists, all overwhelmed with excitement. On the other side, casual observers began quietly shifting their stance. The topic quickly soared to the trending list, and views on Derek's ghost character stills surged dramatically. In the discussion groups, some of Derek's detractors fell silent for a moment, then quietly changed their online identities and slipped into the comment section, pretending they'd always just been curious bystanders. Others stubbornly remained, confronting Oliver and others in replies under 2 separate posts, bluntly stating, "Having just a good face means nothing. Acting isn't posing for photos. An actor with no skill is just worthless." When it came to acting, Oliver truly lit up. Ever since Derek was cast, she had been repeatedly criticized behind the scenes. First through organized complaints, then scattered doubts, followed by Daniel stirring things up, and now reaching this point, she'd wanted to respond countless times. But first, Derek's side had remained completely silent, leaving her unsure of the team's stance. Second, the production's public relations team believed this level of online buzz could actually help maintain interest in the show during filming. So Oliver held back, but she wasn't someone with a calm temperament or much patience. Being repeatedly called out for making poor choices and questioned about her professional judgment felt like dancing right on her personal trigger zones. So fed up, Luna stayed up all night editing feverishly and released a video directly to Weibo at AM the next day. Oliver, when you're speechless, you can actually cut together anything. Nothing much to say. My keyboard's ready. Send me your negative messages via private message. I'll send them back for free after the show airs. Oh, and please record a video. I'd love to watch. Even though she posted at an odd hour, within minutes, comments on that post skyrocketed in an incredibly rapid surge. The video was just 4 parts. The first showed Derek's initial audition, sitting alone in an empty conference room. Then Levi unexpectedly appeared. After a brief moment of surprise, he quickly adjusted and the two began a tense exchange, facing off with sharp chemistry, until Derek suddenly stepped out of character, leaving it abruptly and wonderfully unresolved. The second part was Benjamin's costume video. His long sword drawn in one swift motion, a glint of light reflecting off his calm and refined face. His high ponytail fluttered behind him as the young swordsman confidently stared into the lens. Then the scene flashed back. Derek leaning against a rock, with Benjamin's closest friend lying scattered nearby. He gently ran his fingers over a wooden carving, eyes filled with quiet warmth. Lucas, I really hope to see the day you claim the top spot on the Lingyun rankings. The third part was a scene filmed just last night, the ghost character sequence. Derek tilted his head slightly as he interacted with Austin, who played Lucas. In an old temple, the lighting was dim. His eye twitched ever so subtly, and his eyes sparkled with amusement. That single word, Lucas, spoken by him, carried a depth of emotion, like the whisper of a seductive spirit or a spell that pierced straight into your soul. When Derek finally woke up after a lazy morning nap, the trending topics on Weibo had already shifted dramatically. His photo from the nightmare spirit scene was pushed down to 3rd place, while his performance received top billing, and Oliver's comment quickly followed, becoming the main force behind this wave of public discussion. The conversation had now turned from initial questions like, is Derek just relying on connections or deserving of the role, to wondering whether he could truly carry off both characters' most intense moments. Even some book fans who had previously declined 3 times began switching sides, growing excited about the upcoming release. Of course, some people questioned how closely the Nightmare Spirit's portrayal matched the original version. After all, in the novel The Blue Bird *, she was only briefly mentioned as Owen's trusted ally, and during Benjamin's first arrival in Suju City, she once created a dream for him, one that repeatedly revealed the long-buried truth behind the fall of Xie Mansion. After watching silently for a while, Ava finally responded to the fan. Given the visual intensity required for the scenes, we discussed and decided to cast Derek as Inshua, using Benjamin's appearance to guide Lucas into the dream. Regardless of any adjustments, the core of the Blue Bird and our filming focus remain unchanged. Please rest assured, Derek, now at the center of public attention, had successfully secured an entire day off from the production team and was sitting in a cafe below the Infinite Entertainment building, idly watching people pass by. He was here to meet Noah. The Blue Bird production team wanted to increase his workload, and the newly drafted contract needed to be reviewed with the company and his agent. But this small matter didn't really require him to come in person. Just a simple request. But then he remembered the issue about his previous livestream commission, and since this was a rare chance to bring it up directly, he couldn't let it slip by. Unfortunately, he didn't arrive at the perfect time. The stubborn Noah was busy accompanying his new artist on another schedule and likely wouldn't be back for a while. Derek didn't want to be stared at like a spectacle in the office, so he decided to head downstairs to the cafe, found a quiet corner by the window, put on his sunglasses, and started idly gazing outside. This area is the central business district of City A, housing several well-known entertainment companies, as well as numerous firms in finance, software technology, advertising, cultural creativity, and more. It was lunchtime now, and countless people of all kinds were coming and going outside. Derek leaned against the window, his straw flattened from being bitten down, with just a few ice cubes clinking in the plastic cup. He scanned the bustling street aimlessly. The calm atmosphere inside the cafe stood in sharp contrast to the lively chaos outside. Jack, growing impatient, checked his watch for the 5th time and muttered, "Why hasn't Noah come back yet?" Derek glanced over at him with a teasing tone. Now why aren't you calling him Noah anymore? Jack let out 2 smug huffs and said proudly, because I've grown up. I've finally seen how rough the real world can be. Derek gave a soft laugh, shook the ice cubes in his cup, moved it aside, and leaned down onto the empty table, continuing to watch the people outside through the window. Derek, what are you looking at? Jack asked. Watching people, Derek replied. Jack suddenly understood. Oh, got it. That trick Mason mentioned when he won the award. Observe people, different kinds of people, their clothing and expressions. Yes, their jobs and paths, right? Derek lazily turned his head and said with a sigh, I wish I could say I was just bored or doing it to seem cool, pretending to observe people. But the truth is, I'm actually studying them. Still, now that you've mentioned it, I kind of feel a bit awkward. It's making me seem less stylish than I wanted. His college roommate was always dragging them out to watch people, claiming it was for gathering performance material. But more often than not, once they settled into a cafe, everyone else would be playing games or scrolling through phones, until only the roommate remained, left alone on his own. Still, sometimes Derek would join in. After all, the reactions when they compared answers always ended up with some really unexpected laughs. Jack didn't take his complaints or dry humor seriously. He just leaned down beside him, following Derek's line of sight out the window, and asked on his own, So, Derek, whom are you watching now? Derek pointed casually. Through the glass, under a tree across the way, a girl was talking animatedly on her phone, clearly pouring out words to someone on the other end. One moment frowning, the next bursting into laughter. Jack confidently said, She's probably just an ordinary office worker. Judging by her clothes, she likely works at an ad agency. Only art students usually dress this nicely. Probably taking a lunch break and talking to family. Derek gave him a look that said, You really are the ultimate straight man. Did I get it wrong? Derek let out a slow sigh. Who talks on the phone like that? She's been in that pose for 5 minutes straight. Doesn't she get tired? She's filming me. As soon as Derek finished speaking, the girl seemed to sense something. She quickly lowered her head to avoid their gaze, and the phone tilted just enough for Jack to catch a clear view of the camera screen. Wow, really? Jack clapped his hands together with excitement. Should I go ask her to delete the photo? Calm down, Derek said smoothly, gently calming him down. Let's just stay a little longer. Jack added again, Derek, maybe we should head upstairs. It's crowded down here. Your current spotlight makes it risky to hang around. Derek didn't seem bothered at all, his fingers lightly tapping the table as he spoke casually. My face isn't something I need to hide, and with this big pair of sunglasses on, there's no risk of a bad expression showing up. Let her take the photo if she wants. Jack stared wide-eyed. Derek, you're really level-headed, but we should still keep an eye out just in case. Nowadays, fake rumors can sound convincing enough to fool most people. If she spreads something wild for attention, we'd be the ones losing out. Derek gave a lazy smile, his gaze drifting elsewhere. Let her do what she wants. If she dares to post it, I'm not afraid to take legal action. Just as they were talking, the door chime rang suddenly, followed by the sound of footsteps on the floor. Derek turned to look. There stood Noah, impeccably dressed in a suit, wearing his usual polished and insincere smile. The moment he spotted Derek, his expression instantly shifted into something much warmer. He quickly approached with an eager stride. Derek, sorry I made you wait. Just got the new talent to their schedule. Traffic was a nightmare. You should have let me know you were coming today, but signing contracts isn't such a big deal. Jack could have handled it just fine. No need to go through all this trouble. Derek gave a tight-lipped smile, his lips barely moving as he stood up and gestured toward the office. No problem. I'm on vacation anyway. Noah smiled warmly as he walked beside him out of the cafe, pulling out his phone to check messages while saying, Things have been pretty lively lately. Every time I open Weibo, there's nothing but praise for you. I always told you, if you've got real talent, it'll only be a matter of time before you prove everyone wrong. The words sounded like praise, yet they carried an unmistakable air of superiority and a hint of insincerity. Derek picked up on the hidden meaning but didn't respond. He pressed the elevator button and stepped inside without looking anywhere else. Still, Noah glanced at him with a sudden, knowing smile. I saw that video Luna posted last night. You did pretty well in it. It's impressive how Oliver, who's usually so strict, ended up giving you extra scenes. He must have put in quite a bit of effort. Derek had already suspected that Noah knew about the truth behind the fake heir, and that he'd been dropped by the Lin family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated him so casually. Now, probably because Derek had accidentally rebuilt some of his reputation. Combined with Daniel's recent incident and Oliver starting to view him differently, Noah sensed something off. His attitude toward Derek shifted slightly, and he was now deliberately testing whether Derek had found a new ally. If the original person had been straightforward, he'd likely have already started bragging by now if he really had someone backing him up. But Derek wasn't like that, and he didn't know if Edwin would even want to be seen as his support. He wore an expression of innocent confusion, staring at Noah with wide eyes that said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." Sure enough, Noah's demeanor visibly eased. His tone had softened too. "Luna really went all out with your performance. It wouldn't have turned out this well without a lot of behind-the-scenes help and her expert editing." Jack couldn't hold back any longer, frowning as he asked, "Noah, what do you mean by that?" Noah raised his hands with a pretend innocent look. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'm just saying external support is part of strength too. Everyone's praising Derek online. I'm genuinely happy for him, but as his agent, I feel it's my duty to gently remind him not to let praise go to his head again, or he might end up causing trouble once more." Though called a friendly reminder for Derek, the message was clearly meant to undermine him. Every word edged with sarcasm. The elevator doors opened, and Derek stepped out first. He turned back with a faint, unreadable smile, giving Noah a slight nod. "Don't worry, Mr. Noah. I've got things under control now. I'm much less likely to get carried away." "That's certainly good to hear," Noah said with a dark smile, pulling open the office door and hurrying to his desk drawer. He unlocked it, pulled out a document, and handed it over, muttering under his breath, "I've always told you to work on your attitude. You see how much better things are now?" Derek smiled quietly, saying nothing. "Here's the contract you signed with the Bluebird team earlier. Go ahead and check it yourself if you need to compare anything," Noah said, pulling out his chair as he prepared to sit down. But just then, Jack suddenly poked his head in from the doorway. "Noah, the legal team wants you. Something came up and they're not quite sure what it is." Noah frowned, confused. "Who sent that? What did they say?" "He left a message and walked away before I could catch what it was. Maybe you should go check it out yourself." Noah hesitated, glancing at Derek. "If you have something to attend to, go ahead. I'll keep working on how much to raise the payment. If anything comes up later, we can discuss it together." Noah paused for a moment, as if thinking something over, but after half a minute, he finally said, "All right, you keep going. I'll go check what this is about and come right back." As soon as Noah left the room, Jack quickly followed. "Hey, Noah, can I come along to learn a bit? If there's anything confidential, I'll step out right away." The office door closed behind them. Derek looked up, listening as the footsteps and voices faded into the distance. He quickly shoved the contract onto the table, then pulled open Noah's drawer and started gathering all the documents related to himself. Time was pressing. As soon as he found the live streaming contract, he began recording. There wasn't time for anything else. Just capture what he could. The wall clock ticked steadily. Derek held his breath. The sound of his fingertips brushing the paper echoed too clearly in the silent room. Cold sweat formed on his forehead, and his heartbeat pounded like a drum. He dared not turn the pages too fast, worried about missing focus, but also couldn't go slow, as if some invisible force was squeezing time. Every footstep outside made him freeze up instantly. It felt like an endless wait until Jack's voice finally returned from outside the door. Derek moved almost in a blur. He neatly stacked the contracts, shoved them back into the drawer, then immediately returned to his original seat, grabbing the contract for the Bluebird production and pretending to be deeply troubled. Isn't Daniel being completely unreasonable? And Derek defending his fair rights isn't wrong either. We've got solid proof, just one lawsuit, and we'll win every time. You're not even studying law? You shouldn't sound so sure, Noah said with a hint of annoyance, pushing the door open. Seeing Derek looking up curiously, he immediately asked, "Why didn't you tell me you filed a lawsuit against Daniel?" For a few seconds, Derek's face went blank before slowly registering. He slapped his forehead and said with a sheepish grin, "Oh no! How could I forget about that?" Without thinking, Noah glanced toward his own desk. Nothing seemed out of place, then walked over to sit on the sofa. Back when Jack was dropping me off at the studio, I had nothing to do and just scribbled up a complaint. I filed it through the court's online system, Derek said, scratching his head. It took 7 days for review, and I submitted extra documents in between. I totally forgot about it, so... Is that why legal called you? To talk about settling things with Daniel? Noah gave Derek a complicated look, almost unable to believe such a clever move could come from someone like him. Did you write the lawsuit? Derek nodded vigorously. Yeah, but I had someone help me polish it. Don't worry, Noah. My real identity wasn't exposed. That person has no idea it was me. In reality, he'd written it all himself. He only blamed someone else to avoid raising suspicion from Noah. Noah asked, $80,000 in compensation? I looked into it. Things like lost wages and emotional distress. $80,000 shouldn't be a big deal for Daniel. If he really decided to fight me in court, he'd probably end up paying less. But we'd still win either way. Noah gave him a look that said it all. Derek instantly realized the man thought it was too little. You should have talked to us first instead of making decisions on your own all the time. Not just me. When legal got that call, they had no idea what was going on. Noah ran a hand through his hair, hiding his frustration. Derek, you always put me in a tough spot. Derek thought, if I told you ahead of time, how could I have gotten Jack to take you away? Next time won't happen again, Noah. But he still played along and admitted fault in the most innocent way. He handed the contract back to Noah and continued, I've thought it over. Let's bump up my fee a bit, but not too much in name. I'm just stepping in at short notice, which could also help build some goodwill. Derek opened his mouth and quietly said a number. Noah's eyes flickered, as if he wasn't happy with the decision. He was about to speak up when Derek seemed to anticipate what he was going to say and cut him off mid-sentence. Noah, you taught me think long-term, right? I can't get carried away just because someone says a few nice things. Gotta stay grounded so Oliver doesn't think I'm asking for too much. Leaving us with nothing. Derek gave him a rehearsed smile and waved at Jack. Then it's settled. I've got an event tonight. I'll head out now. Thanks, Noah. He left without giving Noah a chance to stop him. The office door slammed shut, and Noah tossed the contract onto the sofa, muttering, just this little thing? I had to come all the way back for this? As Derek settled back into his car, he noticed his phone, which had been silent for a long time, buzzing with an incoming call. The notification bar showed 8 missed calls, each from the same number. Derek quickly answered, and Daniel's deep voice came through like a bomb about to detonate. What do you mean? You told me to talk to your legal team, but they have no idea what's going on. Did you trick me? Derek said nothing. Daniel fell silent for a moment, unsure whether someone on the other end had spoken or if he'd come to his own realization. After half a minute, he said through clenched teeth, I'm sorry I spoke harshly just now. I know I was wrong. I apologize. I lost my head and shouldn't have put you in this situation. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. But please, ask him to let me off the hook. Finally, Derek spoke. I agree to mediation, exactly as stated in the complaint. A written assurance letter, a public apology on social media, and an compensation. As for Mr. Edwin, you'll need to handle that yourself. After all, he's the one who's upset, not me. I can't just speak for Hai. Otherwise, it would seem rude, and he'd be angry with me too.